Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the boy in the team in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 36, Yesterday's doubts are today's truths. Shinku frowned. This was starting to worry him. He walked through the road back home with people gazing at him and whispering. What was going on? That's Harano-san's son, right? Shiku. No, I heard it was Shunku. It's Shinku, a third woman whispered. He could hear them just fine. Saw him leave the Uchiha compound this morning. I have a friend who has a shop near them, and so he's the mysterious teammate of the hero. Uchiha-sama must be taking most of the weight of the team. OHI, a nasal voice called to him, as Shinku's ears perked up. A group of older boys between 15 and 16 called to him. You Shinku? No, he replied, blinking his eyes. My name's Hibachi. Oh, one scratched his chin. Sorry then. He shrugged, as if it wasn't anything to worry about, and then went his way. Really, what was he supposed to say to a group of genin holding their hands over their kunao pouches that had stopped him in the middle of the street? Yes, it's me, please let's go in the dark alley so you can hit me? My sister described him pretty well though, another boy muttered. Well, wait a moment then, what team are you in, brat? The ringleader asked, gazing at him. Team 4, I'm with Kota and Ami. I know Kota, he's in Team 4, one of the other boys stated. There, see? Now scram, kid, the older genin gestured towards Shinku, who happily obliged and got out of there. He didn't go far. Hey you, another voice, this time belonging to an elderly woman, reached him. You were with Uchiha-sama a few days ago, right? So you are Shinku. The older boys from behind him hissed. Shinku dashed ahead. Leaving behind the market and taking a running start, he jumped on the side of a building and climbed straight up without looking back. Behind him, he could hear the steps of the older genin follow him. There was a flicker and a hand came down for his left arm. He slammed his right straight through the guts of the boy, who lurched over. He spun, jumping to grip on the boy's back and use him as a human shield as a fist came straight for him. The first of the older genin was out like a light after that. The remaining 4 surrounded him afterwards. We just wanted to talk, the ringleader stated, but if this is how you want to play it. Like you weren't planning this from the start, Shinku snarled back. What was it supposed to do, scare me? Your pitiful display wouldn't scare a mouse. He hissed, as his own hand went for his pouch, which he didn't have. He had everything in the flak jacket. The flak jacket he had left at home. The dead last of the academy thinks we aren't scary, the older genin drawled out. Maybe being so close to Konoha's prodigies made him stupid. We'll give you a wake-up call then. The one on the right slammed his fist in Shinku's sides before the boy could do anything. His breathing hitched, coming less as soon another punch slammed into the left side of his face. His head ringed and his sight grew hazy. No hits above the face, imbeciles. Don't leave anything visible. You make it sound easy, one of the others snapped. A kick pushed Shinku on the ground. Now listen here, dead last, the ringleader knelt down in front of Shinku. You're a worthless stand-in, don't get any funny ideas about being worth anything to the rest of the world, because you aren't. You're a sickening horrid bastard, who nobody even wants, and if I... There was a gurgle. A kunao stuck straight through the throat of the ringleader. Where would you be without me? Inner Shinku stated plainly, slicing through the neck of the older genin and then snarling, as he threw 3 kunao, 1 per thug that struck true. Really, Inner Shinku knelt down next to Shinku, where? I'm dreaming, right? Outer Shinku muttered. Of course you are, Inner sighed. Come on now, time to wake up Shinku. We have a long day ahead of us. Shinku opened his eyes. The window of his room was open. He frowned, before carefully standing up and heading towards it. The giant snake, holding a bear in its jaws, slithered through the bustling streets without a care for the people it squashed beneath its scales. It didn't care. They were ants, and it was, well, a giant snake. Shinku finally, utterly, woke up with a gasp. The window closed, it was early morning, and he felt the need to retch. Covered in sweat, he dashed for the bathroom and then washed his face. Are these the nightmares? he muttered, gasping for air. Don't ask me, he murmured back. I'm you. Thanks for the help, Shinku said. It felt so real. Yeah, it probably will be. I mean, we are lucky we didn't spend much time inside Konoha. Heck, catching Tora was the only mission we had up until now. Nobody knew we were teammates with the Hokage's daughter and the Uchiha's clan heir, but now they will know. I don't think they're going to attack me like in a cheap B-rank movie, Shinku mumbled. That was just a dream. Probably they won't, his inner self stated, but we can't be sure now, can we? Let's train the Shunshin. I agree, wholeheartedly. It was early morning, and Shinku's feet carried him all the way to training ground 7. The 3 wooden poles stood there unscathed and untouched. His head went thunk lightly against his own, before he gingerly touched the handle of the Kirigaku or Kunao. Its blade curve, it eerily glinted. He chuckled as he wielded it, gripping tightly onto the handle as he neared the weapon to the pole. The edge was sharp, routinely sharpened to the point where it shone of light by itself. His eyes reflected off the edge of it. He placed it back into its strap, before turning and then looking forward. He'd train the Shunshin. He could do it. If he became fast enough, people wouldn't be able to catch him. Kakashi arrived next. He arrived early on purpose. The reason was that if he arrived late, then the Ika specialty store had received the order from the Hokage not to sell him anything. He technically had been grounded to only D ranks for the duration of the entire month before the beginning of the Chunin exams, and he couldn't actually teach the team. He had practically become the paid bodyguard. Teaching had passed over to Yojeo. On one side, it was nice not having to worry about what to teach to the children. On the other, he actually felt slightly wounded. They believed him so petty he actually wouldn't teach them properly if asked. Second time was always the charm, right? He hid among the branches, watching his weakest student try to go through the Shunshin motions. Humming, he waited until the boy was just about to try again, and then he descended straight away. Shinku ended up barreling against a leg, which sent him to crash on the ground and roll as his eyes widened. Yo, Kakashi said plainly, careful with your footing. Shinku coughed as he stood up, dusting away the dirt from the front of the flak jacket. Gah, you did that on purpose. Yes, Kakashi admitted. The man then shrugged. You should learn how to use the Shunshin laterally and diagonally, rather than using it to simply go forward. You can use the body flicker to go backwards too, which can be a lifesaver when you're stuck in a narrow corridor and the newbie of the team just primed an explosive tag. Shinku looked at him warily. Furthermore, the basic techniques can be used in combination. Flickering and leaving behind a kawarimi, for example, or leaving a henge in the spot you flickered away from, is an excellent misdirection. Kakashi gazed at him with his single eye. We need to do something about your reflexes, eye coordination, and more, but we don't have that time. Yes. Technically speaking, I'm forbidden from teaching any of you without the strict supervision of Uzuki-san, who will take over as Jounin sensei of this team for a while, as I repent and do humiliating extra D ranks like cleaning the sewer system. The man rolled his only visible eye. On the other hand, I find your will to improve refreshing, Kakashi chuckled. So, have you thought about my offer? I want to survive the Chunin exams, Shinku whispered. Why stop there? Kakashi asked. There's nothing actually stopping you from becoming a Jounin. Uzuki-san isn't from a known clan or particularly renowned as a prodigy, and neither was Guy. Heck, the majority of Jounin aren't from clans to begin with. But there are many more Chunin and Genin, Shinku muttered back, and the missions are. You're scared? Kakashi asked, inclining his head to the side. Of hard missions? Of dying? Shinku awkwardly nodded. Don't be, Kakashi shrugged. You know, missions aren't really all that difficult, the man sighed. High-level ones, I mean. You just have to do a proper job. Infiltrate the house, kill the target and then leave. Quick, clean, a Genin can do it too. They're left to Jounin because it requires a certain skill and paranoia to check for traps. There's no undo button. The guy has a Kunao launcher in a corner of the room and it nicks your vein, Jounin, or not you're going to bleed out fast. I'm the dead last, Shinku stated plainly. You aren't. You aren't, Kakashi remarked dryly. You haven't been for a while. Of the rest of your class, you were the one who improved the most. But the tradition. The tradition is just that, a tradition, Kakashi hummed. Just like the Hokage's word is absolute and final. Shinku's eyes widened for a fraction, before he exhaled a breath he didn't even know he had held. So, I'm not, the dead last. Well, you're probably the second last or the third last, Kakashi chuckled, but no, you weren't the dead last. Still, do consider the others failed on purpose, which lowered the bar of graduation, which practically means you wouldn't have passed if they hadn't tried failing. Kakashi suddenly turned thoughtful. Yeah, actually speaking, you're probably even worse than the dead last. Shinku's shoulders dropped. Ah, right, he chuckled. Suppose being dead last would have been an improvement. Try to change the direction you retain chakra from being emitted, Kakashi said, changing the argument unexpectedly. If you do that mid-dash, you can change the point of landing. Some need to actually land their foot on the ground as they make the change, which is how many shinobi battle and the reason high-speed clashes end with only showers of sparks. Why are you? You know, the dead last of the class many decades ago was one Hiruzen Sarutobi. The very last of the next generation's class was Jiraiya, who is now known as the Sage of Porn. Kakashi hummed, guess who else was dead last? The Yondaime. No, Kakashi deadpanned, he was a prodigy, just like me. You see, being prodigies or dead lasts, means nothing. Kakashi shrugged. Hands down, if the god of shinobi were still alive now, he'd kick the asses of everyone else, Dojutsu or not, prodigy or not, and he wasn't a prodigy. You should read his history. I'm not Hiruzen Sarutobi, Shinku mumbled. Well, even the Sandaime wasn't the kami of shinobi at first, Kakashi deadpanned. This is something I learned by myself, Shinku-kun. He brought a hand over the boy's shoulder. We do not need to fit in our father's shoes to make their same strides, we need to learn to walk with our own, so that we may go further. Kakashi then gripped him by the other shoulder and whispered. And if you dare leave my little sister and her Yuke brother to face an ass-licking fanboy or fangirl because you're too scared to go on missions with them, I will find you, no matter where you hide, and you won't like it when I do. So I'm just the comfortable spot filler. Shinku snarled. Exactly. Kakashi clapped his shoulders. But you know, even the mighty Sage of Porn was considered spot filler between Orochimaru and Tsunade. I can't understand if you're trying to help me or you're just messing with me. A bit of both, Kakashi nodded. Still, I might be bored during D-ranks in the afternoon all alone, and I do believe teaching others the skills to survive is useful. Shinku blinked. You want me to do your D-ranks? Yep, Kakashi nodded. You can even keep the spare change. Shinku clenched his fists. You'll help me afterwards. My invaluable suggestions will be at your dispo. Yojo's hand shot for Kakashi's ear, gripping him tightly. Bad. Bad hey take. Ouch, ouch, hey. You're alright. Yojo asked then, eyeing him worriedly. Really, have you no shame hey take-san? Trying to force your punishment on someone else. The Hokage will know of this. Kakashi chuckled nervously. There's no need to bring sensei and everything, Uzuki-san. Kakashi nii. Wait, Naruko arrived in a flicker, Suzuki just behind her while Fu flew her way down. You're here early? No, that's not possible, she narrowed her eyes. He's got to be a spy. Hey now, that's not. He was forbidden from carrying Ika-Ika, Yojo mused over, gripping the handle of her katana. Traitor, Kakashi muttered, his lone eye narrowing on Naruko. You said you wouldn't tell. I lied, Naruko stuck her tongue out. Shin-chan, you're all right. Shinku just nodded. And isn't he supposed to have a meeting with the TNI department this morning anyway? Suzuki said, his eyes gazing at the silver-haired Jounin with something akin to satisfaction. Now that's a bit UNF. Hey take-san, you can leave the team in trustworthy hands, Yojo said crisply. Head over to the TNI department. But there's Anko over there. My condolences, now go. With a pout, Kakashi flickered away. Yojao turned to stare at her team. Fu was standing close to Shinku, while on the other side Sasuke and Naruto were both sporting wide and nearly symmetrical feral grins. She didn't like it one bit, but the Yondame's punishment on Hatake-san has already been decided. There is no need to insert your own personal vendetta, she said softly. But he hurt Shin-chan. Naruto exclaimed, and Shin-chan is, like, the mascot. You don't hurt the mascot. I'm a mascot. Shinku mouthed out. Fu giggled. The Chiryunin exams will begin in a month, Yojao stated plainly, once all 4 of her genin were in front of her. They are risky and life-threatening, thus I need to see where each of you stands in the shinobi specialties of Taijutsu, Genjutsu, and Ninjutsu. Afterwards, I will check your Shurikenjutsu and Kenjutsu. She gazed at them all. Who wants to go first? It was professional. Shinku ended up face first on the ground during his turn, but he did manage a henge, a bunshin, and a kawarami nearly flawlessly at least. That was his own personal opinion. He even made a shunshin. He nearly fell down on the ground from chakra exhaustion once more, but he had done well. He said so himself. Suddenly, he found himself trapped inside a tree. It was becoming hard to breathe as the branches and the roots tightened all around him. He coughed, screaming from the pain of his cracked ribs when Inner Shinku gripped at his shoulders and pulled him out. Shinku spluttered, coughing as he wheezed on the ground. Ah. You successfully countered the hell viewing technique, Yojao stated. Very well. Take a rest now. Shinku's back laid against a tree while he watched Sasuke go next. Naruto had gone first. His breathing was even, but his gaze soon diverted to his hands. He could feel the sweat roll off his forehead. He knew this was preposterous. Who ever heard of having a split personality bring you out of a genjutsu? It was impossible. Sure, the hell viewing technique of Yojao-sensei was nothing when compared to Kakashi-sensei's ones with his Sharingan. They tasted bland. They didn't have much, they weren't extremely detailed and they probably fell apart on their own after a short while. He was used to stronger illusions. Just like with training, he was used to life or death. His heart didn't drum in his chest hard as he watched Yojao professionally deal with Sasuke's taijutsu, which flowed way better than his would ever even do. He had to correct his statement even as he watched Sasuke go through more than 3 different ninjutsu that weren't in the Academy's 3, all of which he did flawlessly. He didn't even fall for the genjutsu for a single moment, emerging from it unscathed and bored. Sasuke had a style, he supposed. He was the calm and collected shinobi who was flawless in everything he did. Naruto too had a style, she bull rushed through things, tearing them apart if they blocked her way rather than try to walk around them. Fu went last, and even though she was cheerful and bubbly most of the time, her eyes narrowed and her face became cold as soon as Yojao-sensei gave the start. He had thought Naruto to be fast. He had been wrong. Fu wasn't only fast, but fully able to use the Bijiryu within her to enhance her speed, her power, her abilities. Her ninjutsu was comprised only of bug techniques, but she was truly a monster to fear anyway. Shinku was in a team of strong people, of prodigies. That distinct separation would never cease. Even if he grew stronger than a Chiryunin, he would never reach their level. He didn't actually want to reach their level, it was just a petty jealous thought he squashed away, but he wondered all the same. How did it feel, to be so powerful? How did it feel to have the power to slice a mountain in half, or to conjure a chakra warrior capable of leveling down a city block? How did it feel to be a prodigy? They don't have to fear for their lives. Isn't that what Kakashi said? They have a backup. Your backup is me. You mean I get the split personality who is worth less than 0? I get you out of nightmares, you know. That and genjutsu. How? Well, I'm working on the same knowledge you have. Genjutsu is using chakra to control the brain of the enemy. Chakra is in every cell of the human body, and technically you and I are the same person. I am, Kai, I suppose. Genjutsu is also yin release, and, maybe I am actually a self-created genjutsu by you, which counters the others. I don't know. Ask your fractured mind how she managed to cope. So what, I jutsu-ed you into existence. Probably. Everyone needs a friend now and then, imaginary or not. Add chakra to the mix in a broken psyche and bam. Nice to meet you. Wonderful. How did I do? Fu asked, holding her arms behind her back, carefully pushing her body down to gaze at Shiku's thoughtful expression. The boy blinked, returning to reality. Ah, you were good. Fu smiled, before plopping down next to him. What were you thinking about? She asked, poking his cheek. And nothing, he stammered out. Just thinking. Elsewhere, in the Hokage Tower, Minato Namikaze blinked. What? You heard me the first time, Tabane. Kushina huffed. Mikoto-chan said she was keeping an eye out, and that poor boy was a nervous wreck. He was having breakfast with the Hokage and the chief of the police, Minato countered softly. I would have been nervous too. Nariko complained it's not the first time she tries to look around for his parents, but she has never seen them, Kushina stated plainly. They talk through post-its. How strange is that, This still doesn't demonstrate anything, Kushina, Minato remarked. And shouldn't you be making your suspicions known to, Fugaku? I'm the Hokage, I'm not the social services of Konoha. That boy saved our daughter. I'm not going to just watch from afar if someone's hurting him, Tabane. I understand, Minato sighed. We do owe him. The yondaime closed his eyes for a moment. Very well, I'll ask Fugaku to check. Mikoto-chan's taking care of that side, Kushina smiled. At the same time, in the Uchiha's police station, Fugaku closed his eyes and exhaled. Really? First Sasuke and now even you. Come on dear, you know I'm rarely wrong, Mikoto smiled. You could just make your suspicions known to Tabiki, the one in charge of the social services a few floors below. But you're easier to get to, Mikoto remarked. And then what would they do? Make around? Come on, big chief of the police that you are. You aren't simply going to drop it, are you? Fugaku asked warily. Nope, Mikoto smiled. Fugaku caved in. His wife's smile was terrifying. On the other side of town, Ino frowned. She had tried the day before to speak with Ami, but her mother had gently ushered her away. The mission had gone wrong somewhere or something, because the girl hadn't talked at all and had returned as white as a sheet, believing her mother. Changing her target of gossip from Harano to the reason for the failed mission, this time she managed to corner Hibachi, another member of Team 4, by patiently waiting for him outside his house. The boy wasn't at all in a good shape, his eyes with deep purple rings and his expression haunted. She hadn't even recognized him at first. Hi, Ino said, smiling. I'm Ino, Ami's friend. I'm very worried about her, she hasn't left her house since coming back and... It's... Hibachi croaked out, before closing his eyes sharply. It's not a surprise. Did something bad happen to her? Ino's eyes widened. They did tell the students at the academy about the risks of being captured and all. She brought a hand to her mouth. It couldn't be. No, Ino exhaled in relief at hearing that. But, we saw something horrible, Hibachi hiccuped, before shaking his head strongly. I don't want to talk about that. The boy turned sharply to leave. Wait. Ino's hand shot forth to grab his wrist. What happened? A monster, Hibachi muttered. A demon, he exhaled. A demon? Do you mean, was Team 7 there too? Is this about Nariko? Did she do something? No, Hibachi shook his head, not Namikaze-san, the boy. The boy in the team, Harano, he. Hibachi brought a hand to his throat, covered by a white bandage. He was smiling while he did it. The boy shook his head. We had to, we failed our mission, but Team 7 passed theirs and, I can't say more. He broke free, and escaped back inside his house looking green. Ino frowned, before deciding that enough was enough. She knew where Team 7 trained. Sasuke-kun's fan club knew, and albeit the training grounds had been deserted for quite a while, now that the team was back in Konoha it would soon be filled with onlookers. She'd come to the end of it, no matter what. Harano Shinku took another shot at the marked round circle. It was close to the bullseye, although it wasn't properly at the center. The center had a red dot to aim for. He clicked his tongue, before throwing the shuriken one at the time. They all landed on the trunk, half out of the circle and half inside. It was an improvement. Really, it was. Then it was the others' turns. 5 seconds, and Nariko had hit with everything she had thrown near the center. 3 seconds, and Suzuki had only bullseyes. 10 seconds, and Fu had done just as well as Nariko. He had taken a minute. Anyone here is interested in Kenjutsu? Yojao asked in the end. When nobody answered back, she shrugged. Very well then, she exhaled. I saw enough. She brought a hand to the base of her nose, closing her eyes, as she seemed to be thinking of the right words to use. We have a month, she muttered. Unless you wish to wait for the next time the exam comes in Konoha. Nariko inclined her head to the side. Why? We're awesome. We're all going to pass on the first try, Tabia. Dub, Suzuki hissed, but the single word was enough. He was still the dead last of the class. It didn't matter if he could kill an old man in cold blood, or climb a tree. He was still the dead last. You all have solid bases in ninjutsu, that surprised him. He had expected to be called out on that, since he didn't have any skill beyond the basic ones. You all managed to counter the genjutsu fast enough to be passable, it was starting to shape up nicely. So maybe he wasn't really the dead last? However, Shinku-kun, the state of your taijutsu and shurikenjutsu is plain horrible, Yojao sighed. We'll have to work on that, and you'll have to train as hard as you can in this month, but I'm sure you can do it. He swallowed nervously before nodding. That said, we will all have to train hard. The Chiryunin exams are important not only because they mark your possible promotion to Chiryunin, but also because they allow villages to show off their best and brightest. You will need to know various things in order to become a Chiryunin, because it is not just a matter of prowess in battle, but also of this, she tapped the side of her head. Without a sound mind and a sound body, there is no shinobi. So we're screwed. Hooray! Kaizushi Harino was taking out the new batch of bread from the oven, when he heard the door of the shop open. He turned and looked in surprise at an Uchiha police officer entering the shop with the usual calm and coldness of their clan's trademark ice face. Officer-san, Kaizushi smiled. What can I do for you? The shop was deserted so late in the afternoon, but soon the rush of the people returning from the offices would come through the doors and once more, he'd have to deliver fresh bread. It was the trademark of his bakery and the reason for its success. They baked nearly 24 hours a day, delivering fresh bread by the hour so that it always was crispy, rather than letting it become stale during the afternoon. It did mean that the work was far more than what a normal bakery had to do normally, but it also meant profit and success. He did need to put money away for his retirement. We would like to speak with your son concerning a matter that has come to our attention, the man said dryly. It concerns the last mission he went on. Oh. Kaizushi blinked. Did something happen? The officer looked at him blearily. You do not know. Kaizushi made an awkward smile. I'm busy working, officer-san. I don't have the time to ask Shinku about his ranks. I see. Silence settled between the two men for a few minutes, with Kaizushi growing increasingly anxious. The fire still crackled in the oven. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. The Uchiha police officer kept on looking at him with his dark eyes, apparently waiting for something. Is something the matter, officer? Where can I find your son at this time? Kaizushi blinked. Well, as I said before, I don't really know. Maybe my wife might know, but she's currently out buying groceries. Let me ask you one more question, the officer said, his right eyebrow rising. Do you know at least what team your son is in? Oh, yes. He's in Team 7, Kaizushi replied with a small nervous smile. He said so last time we talked. And how far back would that be? Well, 2 weeks, 3, not more than a month, Kaizushi remarked. He wrote to us a note before going off to training camp, and then he was out again for a mission towards Taki, and then to hunt boars in the countryside I think. The Uchiha officer looked at him with pity. It unsettled Kaizushi extremely. Uchiha police officers had many looks, ranging from, why are you wasting my time, to, stop right there, criminal scum, but pity was not generally among them. It really wasn't. I'm not a father so I can't relate, the officer said suddenly, unexpectedly lowering his voice to a soft tone. But if I were you, I would close shop for a few days and spend some time with my son. Did something bad happen? Bad. The officer's lips curled in distaste. Do you know of what happened in the Forest of Death? Have you heard of the reason that Akigaku Urgin Hierarchy is in town? Have you any idea of what your son's last mission involved? Do you know how many times your son has been in the hospital? Kaizashi's eyes widened briefly, as the officer's face now showed the full brunt of the "Uchiha I am angry at you" face. Then the officer turned and left, closing the door with a bang. Kaizashi looked around seemingly lost for a moment, before staring down at the now lukewarm breads. Maybe he could finish up early for once, and ask what had happened to Mabuki. She had seen Shinko last after all. Then, he'd confront Shinko too. Sasuke Uchiha was livid as he returned home. He knew it was a crime to impersonate an officer, but it wasn't like he had abused of the power to ask for personal information. He didn't know what made him angrier, however, the fact that the man was genuinely clueless, or the fact that Shinko had lied about what missions he had gone on to. Right now, at the training grounds, Shinko was training to overcome the level of difference between them. He wouldn't make it in time, but at least he was trying. It made Sasuke snarl, thinking of how much the situation was similar to his own a few years before. When he trained to become as strong as Itachi and nobody seemed to notice, or when there wasn't a day that went by without people comparing him to Itachi, he had felt angry at the entire world. Shinko had felt resigned. It explained his meekness to the point of it being disgusting. It explained his willingness to follow orders, to keep his gaze down. Since nobody was going to care anyway, why bother raising your voice? Sasuke had to admit he was incensed and enraged, not only because it was wrong to treat someone like that, but because he could relate. Well, that ended now. He wasn't going to let it pass. His chivalric Uchiha blood demanded righteousness. In the training grounds, as the sun died out, Shinko Harino breathed in and out deeply. Now, remember to exhale when you're receiving a blow, Yojao stated. It is fundamental not to be caught inhaling, and be sure to twist your body back in the opposite direction of an incoming strike. Fu was lingering by, while Sasuke and Naruko had left for some reason not specified. Another thing is you're flinching, Yojao stated plainly. Averting your gaze from your opponent for even a second is fatal on the battlefield. Ah. And then, there's your inability to train with someone else. You're afraid of hurting the other side, and so you actually pull your punches, Yojao finished talking crisply, crossing her arms over her chest. I cannot really gauge your speed or your power while giving out strikes if you aren't 100% behind a blow when you deliver it. She inclined her head to the side. A shinobi needs to know when to kill his heart, even during training. Shinko remained quiet, head low. It was easy to say. To do, however, it was very different. It meant risking wounding, hurting, harming. It meant that if by some chance a lucky shot came, someone had to go to the hospital. It meant tears of pain and startled cries, and... Fu, come over here, the tanned girl came over with a smile on her face. Yes, sensei. Hit that wooden pole with a punch, Yojao pointed to one of the 3 wooden poles. Fu nodded, before bringing her fist to her side and then letting a light sheen of green chakra cover it. The moment the blow departed, it shattered the pole, leaving behind only smithereens and clouds of wooden shards. Yojao clapped her hands once. Very well, the woman took the middle pole, before slamming her own fist with grace. The bark shattered, leaving behind an impression in the wood. If you cover your hand with a light sheen of chakra, you won't risk hurting your hands, Yojao explained. Now why don't you try? Shinko stumbled to the last pole, his eyes fixed on the knuckles of his right hand. Well, this wasn't supposed to be difficult. Covering his body with chakra was part of the Shunshin technique, and the hands were the easiest spots to mold chakra inside. He covered in the light blue sheen of chakra his right hand, and then punched forward, closing his eyes. He ground his teeth at the impact, hearing Yojao-sensei's tongue click in dissatisfaction. He opened his eyes blearily, watching as the pole remained perfectly unscathed. Well, Yojao sighed. This is your new exercise. Hit the pole until it cracks. Yojao-sensei then looked up at the sky. Well, I have to go and report to the Hokage now, and get someone to replace the pole, it's late enough as it is. Don't overexert yourself, then. She flickered away. Shinku breathed in deeply, before returning to gaze at the wood pole. Hey, Fu chirped, aren't you hungry? He had a pit of nervousness in his stomach. He wasn't hungry at all. No. Fu blinked, and then shrugged. Shinku ground his teeth as he flung another fist. It didn't scratch the surface. He threw another. There was no result. He threw one more. Nothing happened. Fu yawned, before sitting down with her back against the other remaining wooden pole, closing her eyes. Shinku ground his teeth strongly as he pulled his fist backwards. He slammed it forth with a sickening crack and then yelped, holding on to his bleeding knuckles. Gah! He opened and closed his hand repeatedly, breathing in and out deeply. There was blood on the wooden pole now. It was his blood, but still. Are you all right? Fu asked worriedly, jumping back up and grabbing a hold of his wounded hand. Her hands felt cold to the touch, but as the girl's eyes examined the scrapped knuckles, her face suddenly turned slightly red. Ah! She let go of the hand. Sorry. Ah! He stuttered out. Fu-san. Why yes. She stammered back. Would you like to go and eat something? Last time, it didn't go well, did it? Fu blinked. She smiled then, a warm and happy smile. I'd like that, Shinku-kun. Shinku inwardly exhaled. Things were starting to look up. Chapter 37, Ordinary Madness. Everything was a matter of sacrifice. If one sacrificed something, then they would achieve something else. Sacrifice time into training, and you will earn power. Sacrifice money, and you will buy food. Sacrifice your pain, your suffering, your sweat, and your blood, and you will successfully plow through the adversities of life. Kakashi Hatake sacrificed a lot in his life. He sacrificed Obito when he refused to complete the mission. He sacrificed Rin when she became a ticking time bomb for Konoha. If he had to say it, everything had begun the day he had seen his father sacrifice himself to atone for sins he hadn't committed. He had always been proud of his father. After mother's death, it had only been them and no one else. The house was empty for most of the time, as his father had to go on missions. He had graduated at 5, in time of war. At 6, he had become a Chunin, killing more than enough men to dye his hair red with their blood. Graduation to Jounin had to wait until he was 13, but all along, he had been ready to do what the mission said. Shinobi were soldiers who endured the worst agonies and survived. They were fighters who clawed their way out of death's grip time and time again until they succeeded in stabbing the skeletal bitch in the back, in severing the spine and shattering the scythe. They were both bringers of death and walkers in the shadows. It was poetic and ironic, when in the end it all boiled down to how well one could kill or protect someone. There was a moment of quiet silence, as he contemplated what to do next. The mornings, he had to spend them in the TNI department for at least 2 hours, helping crack down a few tough guys with his Sharingan illusions. The afternoons, he was doing D-ranks and sometimes following the team around. It was humiliating. He was an instrument of death and war. He could slice a head or nick a vein from miles away and yet he was washing a floor with a dingy old mop in a restaurant, or smiling to an elderly woman who needed someone to paint her walls. He had to weed a garden next, when his sixth sense tingled. His Ika sixth sense that had served him faithfully began to tingle. Small white paper flakes fell from the sky, a few orange, many white and black, and a couple green. His eye narrowed. A word stuck out from a slightly bigger flake of paper, and with it Kakashi's heart plummeted down. It wasn't possible. His precious treasure. Nariko puffed her chest out from atop the nearby rooftop, dusting her hands off a job well done. You thought we wouldn't ask Dad about your Kasha, Nariko chuckled darkly. Nobody escapes the holy punishment of the beautiful Nariko-sama, Kakashi nii. Nobody. Cackling like an evildoer, Nariko flickered away. Kakashi fell on his knees, sobbing as his precious and last copy of Ika blew away carried by the wind. He cried from his only eye the fakest of tears. He really didn't care about the series, but he had to put up a front. If people knew he didn't like it, but preferred another genre of stories, they would target those, and it wouldn't do. It was better for enemies to target smut books, than his true passion, animal books. He loved to raise dogs. After all, how no one had realized that simple fact was due to him being extremely secretive over it. Kakashi Hatake was all about ika smut and being late. Nobody knew he was also a dog breeder, an animal lover and a member of the Afternoon Green Tea Society. Nobody would ever know. He'd kill them if he had to. Shinku Harano ended up walking Fu back home, which apparently was in one of the nicest sides of town. Namely put, Fu was living in the Hokage mansion. "Thanks for the dinner," Fu said hesitantly as they neared the gates. The guards within probably recognized her, because they didn't bother the two of them still loitering in front of it. She brought both arms behind her back, stretching lightly. "It was nice." Shinku chuckled just a bit. "I didn't end up nearly dying, so I think it was nice too." Fu pouted for a moment, before locking eyes with him once more. There was a little smack on the side of his cheek. It happened so fast he didn't even realize what it was at first, and then Fu, red in her face, added, "See you tomorrow, Shinku-kun." And with that she went off. Shinku stared at Fu retreating for a moment. He blinked. He brought his right hand to his cheek. Had. "Ohi," one of the guards held a snicker, "close your mouth or you'll eat flies." Startled, Shinku sheepishly nodded and left. He returned home to a lit kitchen. Frowning, he peeked inside. Both of his parents stood waiting, and that terrorized him. He knew there was no reason to be afraid, but it was the first time in months that both his parents were back home with him so early. Generally, they were back way beyond dinner time, when he was already asleep. "Sit down, Shinku," his mother's tone was sharp and stern. He swallowed nervously. His mother always had a kind voice, except when angry. Then her eyes narrowed, her face grew cold, and she spoke with such a stern voice that it made even his father whimper in a corner. He obeyed without hesitation. "Where did you have your training camp?" his mother asked firmly. His eyes widened for a brief second, before he gripped at his knees and looked downwards. "In a forest." "Where?" his mother pressed on, slamming her right hand on the table with such a bang that he inwardly screamed as his eyes widened even further. "Don't you dare lie to me, young man." The Forest of Death," he stuttered out. "The Forest of Death." Mabuki Harano inclined her head to the side for a moment, before her face grew angry. "The Forest of Death? Is your sensei a psychopathic murderer? Why didn't you tell us? Why did you go along? The Forest of Death isn't a place for genin. It's not a place for training anyone. It's dangerous and you could have died." Mabuki breathed in deeply, before continuing. "Today, a police officer came to talk with your father. He was looking for you concerning something about the last mission you did." "They had an enlightening conversation," Mabuki remarked. "Well, what happened in Taki? What happened in your last mission?" Shinku clenched his fists. "Why do you care?" he hissed back. "You never cared before. Don't talk back like that to your mother," his father exclaimed. "The police was looking for you, Shinku. It's no tiny matter. What did you do?" "I killed a man." Shinku snarled back, slamming his palms against the table. "That's what I did. I killed a man because I had to." This time it was his parents' turn to be shocked. "Shinku," his mother began, her voice now soft. "No. Don't Shinku me," he snarled. "I did what I had to do. I killed even more during the Taki mission, where I nearly fucking drowned in one of their goddamn pools." Breathing in deeply, Shinku shuddered and coughed. "I've had my limbs broken and clawed my way out of a damn cave, so no. No, I don't care. You don't get to Shinku me now. Not now." His eyes narrowed. "You didn't care before, there's no reason to start now." With that, Shinku exhaled and fell back down on the chair, gasping for air. The silence in the kitchen lasted for a few precious seconds, which felt like hours. Beads of sweat fell down Shinku's sides of the face as he evened his breathing. "Dear," Mabuki whispered softly. "We didn't know. You never told us. We weren't ignoring you, we were working, but if you needed us, you could have just asked. Son, Kaizashi said next, it's not like we threw you out of the bakery whenever you came around, right? Sure, we're busy with the business but, you could have come over at any time. Shinku said nothing for a while, keeping his eyes closed. It's just, it hurts to come back to an empty house, he finally whispered. You never said anything, Kaizashi awkwardly replied. We thought you were fine, son, really. You could have just told us. I'm sorry, he meekly stammered. Well, now that we've got everything out of our systems, Mabuki said with a light tone. Why would the police ask about you? I don't know, he acquiesced. I did nothing wrong, I followed orders. Well, no need to break our head over it, Kaizashi shrugged. They'll come again soon I suppose, the man turned thoughtful. Right. So, I can't say I understand what you're going through. I had the luck of going through quite a peaceful time during my term as Genin and Chiryunin, barring the Kyuubi of course, never had to kill, then again Kawa-sensei barely got us out of Konoha, the man was scared of his own shadow. Are you seeing someone for this? Mabuki asked with concern in her voice. I know a few people, if you want someone to talk with and. He shook his head. It's fine. Really, I coped. All right, his mother nodded slowly. Hey, she said then, how about we talk of something less moody? How has your team been treating you? His lips twitched upwards lightly. They're really nice. I'm glad, Mabuki muttered. Who's your sensei? Bazuki-sensei. Bazuki. Mabuki frowned. I can't place the name. She's a newly made jounin, he murmured back. She was Umbu once. Oh, well, you're in good hands, Kaizashi chuckled, an Umbu as a teacher And your teammates? Did you set your eyes on the girl of the team already? And no, he shook his head. We're a 6-man team, he exhaled. There's 2 jounin sensei and 4 genin. That's quite impractical. Why? Shinku clenched his hands against his knees. Because I was, the dead last of the academy. What? You told us you were in the middle of the class. Mabuki exclaimed angrily. Really? You're in a heap of trouble over this right now young man, Shannaro. Mabuki, wait, Kaizashi hastily stood to calm down his wife. Now, Shinku, his father said with a serious tone. Why don't you just tell us, instead of us having to pry your mouth open word by word? What are you afraid of? We're your parents, you can tell us anything. He whispered, I'm in the team with the Uchiha's clan heir and the Yondame's daughter, as well as the Jinhiriki of the Nanabe and Heitake Kakashi. Oh, Kaizashi blinked. The man then laughed. That was a good one. Now, seriously, what are you embarrassed about? Are they all pretty girls or ugly men or something? Shinku just stared at him, before shaking his head slowly. Ohi, Shinku, Kaizashi said with his face turning paler. You're in the team with the hero and the son of the police chief. Your teacher is the Yondame's prized pupil. Mabuki echoed after a moment of silence. Yes, Shinku muttered. Yes. He repeated. I'm in Team 7. Mabuki fainted. Dear. Now. Kaizashi quickly grabbed Mabuki. Shinku. Bring me a glass of water now. He hurried to obey, watching as his father gripped on the glass with one hand and then threw the contents straight on his mother's face. He always admired the balls of his father, even when he knew he would be getting hell out of it. Shinku. Mabuki gripped at his shoulders. Have you any idea what this means? She said with a bright smile. You're practically set to become a Chiryunin. I was worried, but this is going to solve everything nicely. What? He spluttered out. You've got connections. Teammates usually stay friends through their entire career. You could even become a jounin. His mother excitedly began to babble, speaking of tax reductions, low-interest loans and things like family rearing and finding a nice girl. He took a step back. No. I said no. Shinku. His mother frowned. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to use my friendship with my teammates for this. If I'll go anywhere, I'll go with my own strength. But Shinku, dear, Mabuki murmured. I'm thinking about you. You can barely hold yourself together, you know I love you, but you're a failure as a shinobi. A failure. He mouthed out. You know I'm an honest folk, son, his father remarked. But you have to admit, it's enticing. You'd set yourself for life if... No, he hissed out once more. There was a tense silence following Shinku's last refusal. It lasted until Mabuki sighed and nodded. Fine, his mother muttered. Waste this opportunity. Huffing, his mother left the kitchen. His father remained for a moment more, before putting his right hand on Shinku's shoulder. Son, he began, since we have the time, you and I need to have a talk. His father smiled. I remember my father gave me the talk after I became a shinobi. You need to understand a few things since you'll be traveling a lot in your early genin days and... Shinku turned, like his name, crimson. Dad. Laughing, Kaizashi explained. Shinku would have rather returned in the forest of death, with Zabuza as a plushie, rather than hear a single word. The next morning, Suzuki observed his teammate. He was twitching. Suzuki frowned, before waving his hand in front of him. You in there? He didn't answer. He did stutter out something that might have been bee or flower or even physical interactions, but for once Suzuki couldn't properly catch the meaning of it. Shinku, you here with me? Suzuki asked again. Shinku blinked. Why yes. Did something happen? Shinku shook his head. And no, nothing. Suzuki gripped his shoulders tightly, narrowing his eyes as he checked for any signs of violence on Shinku's face. Shinku stared perplexed at Suzuki's action, wondering just what was going on. They didn't hit you, did they? Suzuki snarled out. Who? He blinked. Suzuki clicked his tongue against the top of his throat, before growling lightly. You know who I'm talking about. Shinku blinked again. Was he referring to the day before? No, he shook his head. We just trained, I scraped my hand on the wood but... Arg. Suzuki growled, his hands in the air as if he wanted to ring someone. I'm talking about your parents. What? What about them? Shinku asked, before his mouth opened slightly in surprise. Wait. You sent a police officer to check on them. His voice inflexed with a bubbling feeling, as his eyes narrowed. I told you I was not abused. It wasn't because of that, Suzuki muttered, averting his gaze. Look, I know what it feels like to be ignored or... Want to know something funny? Shinku snarled then, his eyes cold, no matter what shit you spout out, it still doesn't give you the right to barge in my life like you own it. I don't care if you're the Uchiha's heir or my teammate, my life is mine to deal with. Suzuki's face was comical. Shin-ku. Have I made myself clear? Uchiha. Shinku spat out once more. I was just worried, Suzuki muttered, I'm sorry. Shinku blinked, his eyes softening up as his body pulled back from his threatening position. It was like watching the night and the day. Suzuki wouldn't admit it, but angry Shinku was, well, slightly intimidating. If anything else because his eyes told he would kill at the slightest slight. Shinku stammered out. I'm sorry too, he awkwardly said. I don't barge in your lives, can't you do the same? Suzuki nodded. Well. Shinku hesitated for a moment before speaking, is there anything else I should know? Suzuki averted his gaze. Suzuki, Shinku said calmly, what else? I might have set my mother on it. Shinku sputtered out a strained why, before he brought his right hand to his face and closed his eyes. No, this is over. Now, I'm sure, this is done with, all right? No more abused talks. No more social services. No more officers, understood? Last chance, I swear if you don't drop it. I'll talk with my mother when we finish training, Suzuki replied awkwardly. I'm sorry. You know, I'm touched by this concern but, I'm not a vase, I'm not going to break out of nowhere. A sharp shriek soon echoed in the air. Sasuke flinched, before paling. Shinku turned, gazing wide-eyed at a veritable froth of girls and women standing to the sides of the training ground and holding flags. They held flags and banners with words like, "Sasuke-sama, my heart is yours," and "Sasuke-kun, marry me." "Oh no," Sasuke mouthed out in sheer horror. "The fans found out where we're training." Somewhere else, Kakashi calmly began to count his Ryo bills. He counted 50,000 Ryos for telling the Sasuke fan club, and 75,000 for telling the Naruto fan club. Chuckling to himself, Kakashi began to walk to his morning punishment, knowing he now had enough funds to get back all the destroyed Ika. "They look many." Shinku hazarded with a nervous smile. "Where's our angel Naruko-tan?" A slightly overweight man yelled, holding a bright pink coat with a rendition of Naruko making the victory sign. What are those?" Shinku hissed in fright. "That's Naruko's fan club," Sasuke shuddered. "Why do you think she dislikes them so much? Aren't training grounds off limits to people who aren't allowed?" he whispered. "Tell that to all of them," Sasuke retorted. "At least they're keeping their distances." "Ohi, who's the bastard close to my Yukisama?" a lean and mean-looking guy yelled out. Sasuke shuddered some more. Shinku remembered his nightmare. "Where is sensei?" "I don't know," Sasuke murmured. "I'm wary of getting in an argument." "Ohi, you. Stop talking to Sasuke-sama so casually." A girl yelled a bit louder. "Sasuke-sama likes girls with long hair." Shinku gazed with his mouth slightly open at the girl in question, before turning to stare at Sasuke. "Are they completely bonkers?" Sasuke made a strangled noise. "You don't know the battles my mother has to make to keep my underwear away from those guys." He turned slightly red. "I didn't say that." "You didn't, and I didn't hear that," Shinku nodded back sagely. "Stop being so friendly with one another. Sasuke-sama doesn't need." "You know, I'm actually curious as to why they're keeping their distance," Shinku deadpanned. "I mean, there's a restriction order," Sasuke stated plainly. "And I might have accidentally used the Sharingan once to genjutsu them all into running naked in tar and duck feathers." Shinku once more stared at Sasuke wide-eyed. "I blame Naruko's influence," the Uchiha said sagely. She actually was quite proud of taking the blame for that. Yojao Izuki arrived then, flanked by a small group of Uchiha police officers who proceeded to disperse the crowd. "I acquired backup," Yojao remarked. "We can begin." "What of the dobe?" Sasuke asked, looking around for his missing teammate. "She and Fuchan will train in utilizing their Baijuyue, hence they will train outside of Konoha in a non-disclosed location." Shinku warily looked from Sasuke to Yojao and vice versa. "First off, laps. Do as many as you can before you feel your muscles burning," Yojao spoke quickly and without inflection. "Do not slow down your pace." Perplexed, they both complied. It wasn't difficult. It seemed easy enough, if a bit boring. At lap number 13, Shinku was hallucinating. "You can do it. Go forth, Shinku." Inner Shinku exclaimed, running as a ghostly apparition from his side. "Hold your breath. Fight on. Come on now, it's just one more lap." "Gah." He coughed. Next to him, Sasuke was holding on admirably without even a single bead of sweat. "You know, our record at the academy was of 7 laps, Inner Shinku remarked. 7 out of 10, barely passable, wasn't it? We're at 13. It's good, isn't it?" "Speak for yourself," Shinku hissed out. "I think the record was 25 for Sasuke and, 97 for Naruko. She ran around the school until the bell rung, so I can't say for sure, but I think it was 97. Don't let your mind wander." Yojao barked abruptly, scaring Shinku back into running in silence, with his Inner Shinku's ghostly form disappearing in nothingness. He did not reach the end of the 13th lap, but collapsed before. "You realize I meant you had to stop when your muscles began to burn, not when you were prone to collapsing," Yojao murmured as she knelt down to check on him. "Gah, yes. Take 5, chew on this." A small round sphere found its way in his mouth. He chewed on it without overthinking it much. It did taste bitter, but soon a chocolate chip found its way once more in his mouth, and he happily swallowed it all. He felt more and more like a dog now that he thought about it. He just needed a tail to waggle. His breathing evened out in a short time. He began to blink rapidly, as he opened and closed his hands. He felt fine. He felt energized. It was a strange feeling, since just a mere minute ago he had been on the verge of collapsing. Sasuke made yet one more lap. He wasn't apparently sore with just 13 and then stopped. Now, Yojao stated as Shinka walked once more close to Sasuke. What we are going to do is simply sparring. We're going to take rounds, but before doing that... She sighed. Shinku, you'll have to get over your fear of harming people, go to the wooden pole, alright. He awkwardly nodded and went off. Soon, the sounds of Uzuki-sensei sparring with Sasuke filled the air, while in his corner he kept on hitting to no avail the wooden trunk. Dull repetitive hitting will get us nowhere. Shinku ground his teeth. Don't tell me you feel angry at being left out from special training. You had your own, didn't you? This is just being petty and jealous. I know that. I'm not angry. Yes? Then why are you thinking of finding out where Kakashi-sensei is? I'm not. Don't lie to yourself. It's just. Train until your knuckles bleed. Train until your muscles spasm. Keep it up, Shinku. Maybe one day, you'll get to stand simply behind the rest rather than way below them all. Aren't you supposed to be on my side? Aren't you supposed to be using your brain? I'm not against you looking for Kakashi. I'm all for it. We need to find out where he lives, however. Naruko probably knows. Ask her. Yes, I can imagine. Why? Oh, nothing, my psychopathic side wants to chat with him. I'm not your psychopathic side, and you are the one who is thinking of talking with him. I'm not thinking about it, I'm for it. The fist slammed once more in the wooden pole. He didn't even feel the pain in his knuckles. The light sheen of chakra didn't work in cracking the wood, but it didn't give him bloody knuckles. He exhaled. He wouldn't talk with Kakashi. He'd manage, somehow. How are you doing? Yojao asked, appearing out of nowhere. Still nowhere. How does this help? Shinku asked quietly. I mean, I'd break a wooden pole in the end, right? How does that help? Well, why can't you break one to begin with? If it's physical strength, then you're training it. If it's the wrong form, then you're looking for the right one. If you can't even break a wooden pole, this isn't a matter of strength, but of mind. Why can't you? Why would I? It's just a pole. A trunk cut and placed on the ground. It's nothing else. Nobody is going to be angry at you for breaking it, Shinku flinched. They'll just substitute it with another. Yojao sighed. Come on, her eyes settled on him. Give it another try. Concentrate this time. You want to break the pole apart. You want to use your strength to crack it. You don't need to reduce it to splinters like Fu did. Do your best. Shinku awkwardly nodded, and then took a deep breath. Remember Hibachi. It's not. Yojao exhaled when the punch hit, no visible changes from the one before. Someone needs a hand. Kakashi appeared, holding on to a newly bought Ika. Hey Take-san, Yojao turned to hiss at the man. Already done in T&I. Of course, Kakashi hummed. I'm thinking that maybe you're using the wrong method with him, the Jounin added. There is a time where taking things seriously can become too serious. The silver-haired shinobi closed his Ika. Why don't you let me try? The Hokage said. If you fail in teaching him, he'll die in the exams, Kakashi remarked. Unless sensei has decided to substitute Shinku here with Fu? I'd do that actually. Better to have two Jinhuriki than one and a dead last failure. Shinku's bile rose to his throat. It's the only logical conclusion after all, he's not on par with the others, frankly, Kakashi shrugged. It would be best if he simply stopped being a shinobi, but then I'd have to get another washed-off bastard and I'm starting to like this one. Hey Take-san, Yojao growled, but Kakashi kept his single eye on Shinku. Insults don't work, they hurt, but they don't work. Well, all that's left is pretty much killer instinct. Hatake. Kakashi Hatake was going to kill him. It was a simple well-known realization that hit him like a sledgehammer the moment his eyes finally locked on with the single one of the Jounin sensei. His heart drummed in his chest hard as his breathing grew ragged. The man's right hand went to the kunai at his pouch and he knew he was going to die. The man was going to strike him, slice his neck, tear apart his stomach and snap his guts. He knew that. He understood that. He didn't want that. Shinku began to run away, taking more than a few steps before Kakashi's form loomed in front of him a moment later. He screamed as he punched with his right hand the man's guts, and then watched as they flew around. Sometimes, Kakashi said from his right, his hand slowly unclasping from a genjutsu seal. All one needs is the proper motivation. Hatake. Yojao snarled, that's. Ah, Shinku breathed in deeply, before exhaling and looking at the trunk. His heart still drummed in his chest, a smile twitched his lips. He was alive. He felt alive. The wooden trunk in front of him now had an impression. It was barely an inch, but it was there. Told you, Kakashi shrugged. You'll need to put him in life or death situations if you want to train him properly, Uzuki-san. That's preposterous, Yojao retorted. He's just a genin, there's no way it will work. No genin should ever be the subject of killing intent, much less be trained on fear of death. There are laws in place in Konoha. The yondaime being your teacher doesn't grant you the right to torture your students. Sasuke was watching the scene from his spot, but while Yojao spoke heated words towards Kakashi, his eyes caught something else. It was Shinku but, at the same time it wasn't. Sharingan or not, Uchiha were generally sharp-eyed all the same. Trained into profiling from a young age, it was easy for any Uchiha to recognize at first glance a possible criminal by the way they walked nervously, or by how they held their gaze low as if to avoid discovery. Of course, it wasn't a reliable thing, and in the end it could still fail but there wasn't Shinku standing behind Uzuki-sensei. Well, there was, but it was the Shinku of the bridge, not the Shinku of the team. It was another Shinku, and this one was mouthing words to Kakashi. The Jounin had noticed, while Yojao enraged as she was had not. Train me. Kakashi, to that, nodded. Chapter 38, Massacring One's Own Sanity. Konoha's sewer system was not simply big. It was humongous. The smell of shit hung from every wall, the skittering masses of rats poured away from the light and into the deep darkness. You know, Kakashi hummed. Trainees get shit duty sometimes too. Training camp staying waist deep in this stuff, he remarked. Disgusting, isn't it? Shinku felt the need to hurl. He was upside down just like Kakashi walking on the ceiling of the sewer. Kakashi hummed. Where is the leak then? Sometimes, the walls crack and open up, so the smell reaches the roadside. Funny how Konoha is pretty much built on shit, right? Every village has a sewer. Then every village is built on shit, every city is built on shit, and everything else is built on shit, Kakashi deadpanned. What a world of shit. Ah, yes. They're awfully protective, aren't they? Kakashi remarked. Your teammates, that is. Childish, bratty, spoon-fed, but good teammates all the same, right? Why yeah. Would be a pity if you abandoned them to complete a mission, Kakashi said plainly. They probably wouldn't find your body, if someone dumped it down here. Shinku tensed, his eyes trailing around. So easy to rile you up, Kakashi chuckled. You know, the kunoichi in my team had totally the hots for me, he said as they took a turn to the right. Blood was starting to gush at Shinku's head, but he ground his teeth and concentrated. Failure would mean ending up head first in a pool of excrements, and he dearly didn't want that experience. I knew that, and I completely ignored her because I thought feelings were unnecessary. Want to know what happened in the end? She ended up falling in love with my other teammate, but couldn't even confess because he died on a mission. Thoughtful, Kakashi finally stopped. Now, I can't recall if it's right or left here. Shinku stilled. Where are we going? I'm pretty sure there is a crack to the left, but we aren't going there just yet. You know, when the third booted Orochimaru out, it was because he discovered his secret laboratories in the sewers. Fun fact was, Orochimaru not only used the sewers as an easy corpse disposal tool, but also had a training ground down here. The Snake Sunin trained down here. When he didn't want to be disturbed training forbidden techniques. Where else would you go looking for a powerful Snake Sunin in the middle of a sewer? Kakashi took to the right. Should be through here. Shinku began to walk again. Anyway, as I was saying, yeah, my teammate died on a mission, and the girl was inconsolable. I felt bad for it too, since I could have saved him, probably. The mission came first however, so I left him to die. I consoled the girl to the best that I could, but she ended up on a mission to Kiri and we separated. When I met her again, I had to slam a Raikiri through her chest to prevent her from unleashing a Baijuyu known as the Three Tails in Konoha. Kakashi's voice was carefree. I can't recall if her last words were thank you or I'm pregnant. Shinku swallowed the bile in his throat. I'm generally against talking about my private life with anyone, so you should count yourself lucky to be in the few people I do talk about this with. Think about it, not even Naruto or Sasuke know of this tiny little detail of my life. Why me? Kakashi chuckled. You still haven't realized it, kid? Think about it. Take away my Sharingan and what do you have? I still made Jounin at 13 without one, you know. I don't get it. Oh, with time you will, Kakashi remarked. With time, you will. They ceased moving, as beneath them was no longer the river of excrements flowing by, but a marble and surprisingly clean pavement. With a quick jump, Kakashi landed softly on the pavement feet first. Shinku carefully walked his way to the sides of the tunnel, taking the easy way down. They walked in silence afterwards, for a few minutes at least before the pavement began to grow larger, becoming a circular platform that held nothing but smooth walls deeply carved by gashes and holes. There are still the signs of Orochimaru's training, Kakashi remarked. Dried blood was on the ground. Nobody's cared about cleaning this place up or bringing any stuff. Kakashi smiled and then neared a spot on the wall, where he moved aside a fake rock panel. It was white painted wood actually to reveal a few scrolls. Well, nobody except me. There was an unrolling of a scroll, soon followed by a poof of smoke. An armchair, a desk and a radio soon appeared, followed by a few more key items of furniture one would normally find in a living room, rather than in the depths of the sewers. The smell's no longer disturbing you, right? Kakashi remarked. Here I generally train my dogs to sniff out things beneath this stench. They can smell something down here, they can smell it anywhere. Shinku gazed wide-eyed as the man took out a dog training book and began to flip its pages. Now, you go back and find the crack. Once you have found it, report back here. Careful along the way, some say there are area alligators down here. Orochimaru's past experiments required a few and others claim there are worse things, like monsters and the likes. Shinku exhaled before turning back towards the tunnel he had come from. Kakashi watched him leave with his only eye, and the moment his back disappeared from sight, he flickered away. It was training time. Yojao Izuki had a bad feeling. She crossed her arms over her chest the moment she returned to find the training ground empty. Shinku generally kept on hitting the pole until way beyond sunrise. She had no doubt there were troubles at home, the poor thing. Still, he wasn't there. He had probably gone home, maybe to have an early dinner. She couldn't understand why he couldn't even dent the pole with her teaching him, but had done so in less than a few minutes with Hatake staring at him. It was preposterous. She wasn't a bad teacher. Maybe she mothered him too much, but he looked so scrawny. He was sort of like Hayate had been in his academy age. He just needed the trademark cough. Maybe she shouldn't have mothered him to begin with, but it was just something she always did. A few minutes of quiet contemplation later, and Yojao decided she'd check at his home. Shinku's house was surprisingly devoid of activity. The lights were out, and as she carefully made her way inside, being an umbu meant it was trivial enough to open a locked window. She gave a look around for any hint on where her wayward student could have gone. His room was neat, and barely touched. His sister's room was just next to his, and looked not only cleaned recently but also utterly untouched. Shinku probably had a neat freak of a sister. His parents' room was within standards, the bath appeared clean enough, the glass on the mirror was cracked, dried blood was upon it, She catalogued it away for another moment, and then headed downstairs. She remembered the hallway and the kitchen, the table holding a packed lunch and a note on it. Sorry about yesterday, dear. You know I just worry about you. Love, Mom. P.S. We'll be taking a few days of rest this weekend, how about we go somewhere as a family? Beneath the note, scribbled in a small calligraphy that was Shiku's, was the reply. Busy training. No need. So her student had gone back home, before leaving once more. It smelled fishy. She made her way outside once more, closing the window behind her before taking to the roof of the house. If he wasn't at home and was training. Her eyes narrowed to slits. Hey, take. She growled. Nariko gasped for air. A cold bucket of water slammed against her face, making her shudder. No resting to Bane. Her mother yelled. You can't show him any weakness. She groaned. Her mother was terrible when it came to training. Training to use the Kyuubi sucked. It sucked heavily. She didn't have her mother's special chakra, which made it easier to control it. She just had to do with the Shiki-fun. The Sandaime sacrificed himself to seal the Kyuubi in you, Nariko. He entrusted the future of Konoha to you, you understand, to Bane. But Mom. She whined. No. You nearly died the last time the enemy caught you. This will not happen again, do you understand me? Her mother's voice now filled with worry. Fu meanwhile happily sailed in the air without a worry. She was training with the Yondaime in speed. It was fun, trying to catch the paintballs and send them back before they detonated, and making sure not to break them. She giggled as another popped in midair rather than on her or the Yondaime. The bright blue paint fell downwards, slushing Nariko in blue. Gah! Is this a declaration of war? Nariko! Concentrate! Kushina yelled. Ignore them and close your eyes. Once more, try to visualize the seal. Nariko grumbled under her breath, before obeying. The sensation of the paint hardening on her skin just added another layer of difficulty to it, but visualizing the seal was easy. It was dealing with the Kyuubi that wasn't easy at all. The Kyuubi's giant crimson eyes stared at her with pure undiluted venom. OHI! Nariko yelled. You done growling like a mangy mutt. The Kyuubi simply growled, lashing out with its claws and tails against the seal's iron bars. They didn't shatter nor break, and they did look as if they had never been scathed to begin with. Yet every time Nariko was afraid she'd see the signs of wear and tear here and there, she dreaded the day the seal would start to fail. Because if it did, when it did, she'd die. I will never aid my jailers. Better to be gone forever. The Kyuubi roared, showing its teeth. I will fight you every step of the way, bastard Namikaze. Why can't you be as helpful as Fusbijiryu? Why do you have to be such a mangy mutt? I am a prisoner. Would you cooperate with your jailers, insignificant whore? Hey. I'm not a whore. Nariko shot right back. You're an insufferable horrendous wench. You're a putrid sack of flesh that should burn in the fires of hell. You're. Arg. Nariko yelled as she left the place. Kushina looked at her with narrowed eyes once more. Well. He's a bastard. Nariko yelled. Come on. Can't I learn the Raise-Non instead? I promise I'll master it in less than a month, Tabiya. You can't let him rile you up, Nariko, Kushina retorted hotly. Get to it, once more. Nariko pouted. She was sure her teammates weren't being tortured like this at all. Shinku dodged the blow. It was stupid, in retrospect, to dodge a blow by jumping when you were upside down. Gravity didn't work the way you were accustomed to after all. He yelled before bringing his feet down on the putrid pool of excrements with enough chakra to keep him not only afloat, but a few inches above the disgusting liquid too. Then he flickered straight on the side of the wall, avoiding a ferocious blow once more coming from a strange humanoid creature covered in scales. This had to be his luck. Of course, not only he had to get lost in the middle of the sewer system of Konoha, but he also had to stumble upon an old experiment from Orochimaru himself. He swore under his breath, eyeing from his spot on the wall the creature gazing back at him with its snapping jaws. The thing was scary. It was hungry, and apparently, it liked to eat human meat. He ran across the wall, the bulky creature slamming its fist against the side of the wall and breaking it into chunks. What are the chances? Shinku muttered. What were the chances? Oh, I swear Kakashi did it on purpose. I'm sure he handpicked the mission to send me here. Dodge. He jumped from the wall, catching his breath as he skidded across the murky pool once more to the other side. He probably would have to burn his sandals thoroughly, and maybe wash his feet a lot. The beast appeared to be holding on to the walls with its nails and claws, and its rudimentary tail helped him to stand upright. How about you let me go? Shinku warily asked. How about you just stop trying to kill me? If he could get back to Kakashi's, there. The moment the beast jumped for him once more, he flung his entire body in midair. The tail of the beast swished then, the creature doing an air pirouette. The alligator-like limb slammed into Shinku's chest, taking out his air and cracking his ribs most certainly, as he crashed against the sides of the sewer's tunnel. Holding his breath, Shinku stumbled back on his feet and ran. He wobbled on the slippery floor, before slipping and falling on his back, sliding a few more meters with the creature hot on his tail. He'd have to burn the flak jacket too if this kept up. Kakashi-sensei! Shinku yelled as he reached for the training area. Kakashi-sensei! The area was empty. He turned and swallowed nervously. The beast was still there. His sensei wasn't. Kai, he pleaded. Nothing happened. Kai. Again, nothing happened as the jaws of the beast opened up and distended, revealing the sharp fangs and the glinting saliva drooling down its maws. Shinku gripped at his kunai. Well, if this is a genjutsu, I swear the moment I leave it I'm kicking Kakashi's balls. The beast snorted. Ah! Shinku exclaimed. I knew it. This is a genjutsu. Then the beast charged ahead. The claws tore at Shinku's chest, before the mouth snapped down on his shoulder making him scream in agonizing pain. He twitched a moment more, before his eyes finally focused back on the training grounds where Kakashi looked at him with a bored gaze. His Sharingan eye was out and spinning lightly. The same trick is starting to get old, sensei, Shinku remarked dryly. What is the difference between feeling pain and being in pain? Kakashi remarked. In 1 month, and with little time, I can teach you very little, but I can show you a lot. Genjutsu used in training? When did you come up with it? I didn't. Uchiha used this method to rely information on the battlefield. An eye glance and they can deliver a full speech to anyone in less than a split second. Is there something the Sharingan can't do? Shinku queried, a snort in his throat. Brew coffee, Kakashi replied. Now enough wasting time, it is chakra consuming to keep this up. Kakashi was gone the next moment, and the beast was back. Well, Shinku exhaled. It doesn't look that bleak now that. The thing's tail pierced through his chest. He screamed from the outright agony of having his own lungs ripped from the inside out. Shinku fell on the ground hurling, trembling, and then gazing wide-eyed at Kakashi who simply hummed back. Well, is there a difference? I think it's that you aren't going to die but, I wonder, how many times can a man die without feeling death? You're lucky I am not using Tsukuyomi. You wouldn't survive 3 days of continuous deaths. There is a technique like that. Shinku trembled like a leaf. Yes, there is, Kakashi smiled. Maybe we'll get to that, if you're too slow and we need extra time. A few seconds become 3 full days, would do wonders. All right, Shinku coughed. The beast was back. Shinku jumped backwards, avoiding a swipe and then rolled on the ground as the clawed right foot of the creature crushed down where he had been a moment before. It was all in his mind, but he felt tired all the same. Maybe he actually was moving in reality? Down. He knelt as the tail cleaved right above him. Leave the thinking to me. You just dodge the damn thing. He strained his eyes, trying to follow the blurry attacks of the creature. If this is a scenario, we need to win it. Stopping the murderous beast. He muttered once more as his body dodged. How? We need wires, traps, bear traps. He took a leap of faith, running up across the wall with the beast on his tail. We could give it a pedicure. No claws, no climbing. I need something on the moment inner. Shinku barked as he jumped, letting gravity plummet him back down, but this time he didn't land on water, but on the marble pavement of the training ground. He coughed as his ribs cracked, the taste of blood filling his mouth. Not jumping to our doom would be wise, his other self remarked between coughs. Want to try your hand? The next moment, Shinku stabbed forward as the beast's swipe came down. The creature stumbled back, kunao sticking in its guts. Long overreaching swipes, Shinku gripped with his hands at the jaws of the creature. Alligator-like facial features means, weak while opening the jaw, lethal if it bites. I am not doing this, Shinku mumbled in disbelief as he ended up hoisting himself on the creature's back, his fingers tightly gripping on the creature's mouth. I am, you just enjoy the ride, his inner self snarled. We need ninja wire. Why are we without ninja wire? Must be in one of the pockets. Why can't we have nice things pop out from our sleeves like every other shinobi worth his salt? We don't have storage seals on our sleeves, outer Shinku hissed as he held on, the creature growling as it began to charge towards the nearby wall. This is going to hurt, inner deadpanned. I hate you so much right now. Then Shinku's back slammed against the wall, and just like predicted, the feeling of having a spine smashed was something beyond agonizing. It was also surprisingly quick, as his eyes snapped open to yet more retching on the ground. He feebly began to whimper. I. Three's the charm, Kakashi remarked. Shinku froze, holding still in fright with his eyes closed. But we'll stop at 2, the man added. Shinku exhaled in relief, his whimpers slowly dying out as he sat down, washing the taste of vomit away with water from his flask. Have you learned anything from this? Kakashi remarked as he hit his Sharingan once more. I'm regretting asking you to train us, Shinku deadpanned. Where's your other self? Kakashi asked in his usual carefree voice. Whimpering in a corner, inner Shinku hissed. He'll be fine. We'll be fine. So, let's guess a bit more about you, Kakashi hummed as he took out his animal care book and began to flip through it. You're everything Shinku would like to be, but isn't. Wrong, try again, inner deadpanned. Don't analyze stuff that doesn't exist. We're the same. Only, if you push the blame, the guilt, everything on a single side, then it's easier to cope with stuff. So you're the culprit and he's the innocent. No, we're both culprits and we're both innocents, inner snorted. We share the blame, just not in equal parts. You killed to save your teammates, Kakashi remarked. Killing for money is nothing more than a part of the shinobi job description, so you did nothing wrong there either. Oh no, I'm not blaming myself for that. Maybe outer is, but I doubt it. Then what are you blaming yourself for? Shinku chuckled. What a question. He exhaled. Maybe. He blinked then, his eyes turning watery for but an instant. Wiping the nearly formed tears away, Shinku closed his eyes and then took a deep calming breath. I'm fine, he mumbled. Thanks for training me. Tomorrow, same time. Kakashi remarked dryly. Bring a mop and a bucket though. If you keep on retching on the floor we'll need one. Hi, sensei. Kakashi hummed once more as he watched the boy stand on wobbly libs and slowly trudge his way out. He could tell him of the secret exit right above their heads, but walking back through the sewers seemed like an apt exercise to train chakra capacity. Any little bit did it, when time was so scarce. Sensei said he could not teach his students anything with life-risking situations. He had learned most of his stuff during the war after all, and in war there wasn't the comfortable fact that death was just illusory. Each suffering, each pain he so aptly described in his illusions, he felt beforehand more than once. How else could he make them so vivid, after all? Chapter 39, Intuition. Blood wasn't the problem. It dropped thick and viscous from his wounds. Pain dulled out. His breathing evened. Calmly, he gripped onto his kunao and plunged it forward. Only for Kakashi to stop him, his gloved hand grabbing his wrist. No killing Tora, Kakashi remarked. Trust me, it is not worth the prison time. The daimyo's wife will just get another. Tora meowed in fear, the tip of the kunao mere inches away from its face and its big eyes. Shinku exhaled, giving a hesitant nod. Pursuing a cat like Tora during the day was difficult. Doing the same when the sun was down was nigh impossible. A second went by, before he finally palmed the kunao once more. "I hate this cat," Shinka remarked. "I hate Deranks," Kakashi replied in his carefree voice. "I'll go and deliver this. You wait at the usual place, unless you're tired." He was. He sincerely wished to drop dead and sleep until the next year. The exams, however, were looming, and he wasn't strong enough. What use was there sleeping, if he'd end up sleeping forever? "I'll sleep when I'm dead," Shinku muttered. Kakashi flickered away, and Shinku began to walk. He passed by a few drunken men, wailing about their lack of Naruto tan, and a couple of girls with thick baklava covering their faces and holding underwear. He was probably hallucinating from the lack of sleep. Shinku reached for the manhole slightly hidden in the back alley behind the fish shop in the market. Lowering himself in the manhole, he took a deep breath of the putrid stench of the sewers. The sooner he grew accustomed to the stench, the better. He passed by a couple of alligators, happily swimming in his hallucination-induced world. He just hoped he wouldn't fall asleep in the middle of the sewer tunnel. He really didn't want to end up swallowing some of the stuff around him. Burning his tongue would probably be the least of his worries. A few minutes of walk rewarded him with the now familiar training area. He fell with a soft sigh on the sofa and closed his eyes. Kakashi would probably wake him up when the time came to train. Yojo's right eyebrow twitched. "Where?" "Eyes." "Shinku." Her eyebrow twitched again. Kakashi remained dutifully ignorant of it all as he flipped another page of his Ika. You said something. Where is my student?" Yojo ground out. "I swear to God, Kakashi, I don't know what sort of crap you told him, but I know he's been up all night hunting Tora. I swear if you don't tell me his location." "I have no idea what you're talking about." Problem was, Kakashi wasn't actually hiding it because he enjoyed doing so. If the boy had fallen asleep on a bench somewhere, he would have gladly pointed it out. Being probably asleep in his personal private spot, however, meant he couldn't just give it away. It would no longer be secret if everyone else knew about it. "Anumbu saw you too. You were giggling like a maniac reading porn, and Shinka was trying to grab onto that demonic cat. You tell me right now where my student is, Hatake, or else." Yojo took a step forward. "I swear I will burn down your Ika collection." Naruto already tore it to shreds, he deadpanned back. "It is ineffective. I bought 2 more copies. You're even forbidden from carrying it around." Yojo exclaimed, wringing her hands in the air. "How are you still reading it?" "The last one who tried is still in the hospital," Kakashi nodded sagely. "Poor Umbu trainee, hazing is such a horrible thing." "Fine," Yojo hissed. "I'll find out where you hid him, and when I do, you better hope he is still in one damn piece." Kakashi flipped another page. His Ika was suddenly in half, sliced neatly apart by Yojo's katana. "Now that was childish, Uzuki-san," Kakashi said, holding on to his 2 halves of the book. "I'm going to the Hokage," Yojo ground out. "Try and stop me." "No need," Kakashi shrugged. "Be my guest." It wasn't like they could track him down there after all. A light giggling sound woke Shinku up. He frowned, before turning his head to the side and groaning in pain. A soft surface pushed a lock of his hair away from his face, as the pillow he rested on squirmed for a moment. Oh. The light chuckling, "Trust me, this is guaranteed to work." That was definitively Naruto's voice. Had he fallen asleep in the training grounds? He slowly opened his eyes. "Remember the lines?" Naruto whispered from somewhere nearby. Amber eyes stared at him. He blinked. Fu's face was crimson. It was definitively steaming. She opened her mouth, trying to stammer out something. SSLSLE. Shinku closed his eyes and exhaled. He was still hallucinating. He began softly to snore a moment afterwards, much to Naruto's indignation and Fu's actual relief. "OHI!" That scream woke him up with a startled yelp, pulling him to the side as he crashed on the floor. Gagging, he stood up to gaze groggily at an apparently enraged Naruto and sheepishly gazing sideways Fu. "You don't go back to sleep when a pretty girl gives you a lap pillow," Naruto yelled. "That's not how the story goes, Shin-chan." Why was she holding an Ika in her other hand? He had to be sleeping. He had to be having a strange dream brought forth by his exhaustion. Or maybe this was Kakashi having started with his genjutsu already. Naru-chan, Fu stammered out. It's all right. No, it isn't. Naruko crossed her arms in front of her, before pointing at Fu. Now you get your head back on those thighs right now, Shin-chan, and we do the scene again. This time, you don't move. He closed his eyes and exhaled. This was a dream. He had to wake up. The next moment, he opened his eyes to the dull ceiling of the training ground. Oh, he blinked as he looked around. For once I was right. Carefully, he moved to a sitting position on the sofa. I'm awesome. There was still no sign of Kakashi. Shinku yawned, stretching slightly. Well. He grumbled, what time is it to begin with? There were no clocks, and without the radio on it was impossible to ascertain the time. His stomach growled. It could be breakfast time, he had slept an hour, probably. Shinku walked out of the training ground scratching the side of his face. He needed a shower. If he was quick enough, maybe he'd manage before training. He stepped out of the manhole cautiously, making sure to close it behind him. The sun was high as he walked his way home. He reeked of sewer. He was probably going to be late anyway, so he didn't bother running. OHI, did someone open a manhole around here? A loud voice echoed on the other side of the street. He ignored it and kept on moving. Kiba, a stern female voice remarked. He ignored it all and finally reached for his home. He washed thoroughly in the shower, before stepping out nice and clean. Yojao Izuki ground her teeth in frustration. Hokage-sama. This can't really go on. She hissed. Heitake-san is constantly ignoring his punishments. Kakashi smiled from his spot, flipping a page from a glued back together Ika. I am following them most thoroughly, he nodded. This is not erotic literature, he closed his book. It's art in its highest form. Minato banged his head against the desk. Where's the missing student, Kakashi? Here and there, Kakashi drawled out. Sensei, I really have no idea where he might be. Maybe he's at the training grounds right now. Yojao's right hand went up in a fist shaking from rage. He is not there. It's been 2 hours since and I'm worried. You probably dropped him in the forest of death to train, didn't you? Kakashi turned thoughtful. That looks like a smart idea. I already did that though, so it would be redundant. Kakashi-kun, Minato murmured. He isn't dead, right? No, Kakashi shook his head. He isn't. Very well, Minato exhaled. He accepted to train under you, knowing the risks in full. Yes, Kakashi nodded once more. Hokage-sama. This is prep. Then there's little I can do, Minato sighed. Izuki-san, if Shinku chose Kakashi, knowing the risks and accepting the consequences of his choices, there is nothing that can be done. So I get to keep my cute little soldier? Kakashi asked with his eye twinkling. Kakashi, Minato said then, his voice utterly calm. Let me be clear. I love you like a son. The only reason you aren't being tried for insubordination isn't simply because of that, however. I trust you, implicitly, to know what you are doing. I also trust you to do what is best for Konoha, for its people and for the generations to come. If you break this trust, I swear it, Kakashi, you will not like the consequences. You're the only student I have left. I don't want to end up like the Sandaime, having to trial you as a missing nin. Kakashi closed his Ika and nodded firmly once. Of course, Hokage-sama, I know what I'm doing. Very well then, Minato said, ignoring the sputtering from Yojao. If there's nothing else. Hokage-sama. Izuki-san, Minato said firmly. You have a student to train exclusively for the following month. Kenjutsu is your speciality and I'm sure Sasuke will be thrilled to learn. But Kakashi flickered away, as Minato's eyes softened up. Sometimes, even if we know something might hurt us, we still do it because it's for the sake of everyone else. Yojao exhaled. I understand. Sasuke watched warily the sword in front of him. It was in part respect it was Ataka's own Umbutanto and in part fear it was Ataka's Umbutanto. Where is Shinku? The Hokage deemed it best if each of you had a personal teacher for the upcoming exam, Yojao remarked bitterly, her voice making no effort to hide her distaste. Who's teaching Shinku? Sasuke asked, slowly bending to grab the sword's handle with delicate fingers. Heitake-san. Sasuke's grip on the sword tightened drastically. What? That is Shinku's decision, Yojao replied. You should ask him why, if you see him again before the start of the exams. Sasuke ground his teeth. Why? He muttered, why would he do that? Kakashi's a bastard and a monster on his good days. People are inherently different, Sasuke, Yojao muttered. Some thrive best in danger, others in peace and silence. Some are average folks, others hold a spark that will never be tempered. He's just going to suffer for a month, Sasuke mumbled. Kakashi's probably going to drop him in the forest and be done with him. Yojao closed her eyes and grimaced. She had the same thought. Kakashi's ears whistled as he smiled, while watching Shinku calmly chew on the Yakiniku's choice meat. The boy's eyes were narrow and gazing at him with that very nice spark of mistrust and wariness that every shinobi worth his salt had. You laced the tea? No, Kakashi chuckled. I admit teaching a single children is better than teaching 3. There's also less pressure since you aren't expected to win and become a Chiryunin at the first bout, and doing so without receiving accusations of favoritism to boot. Think about it. If Naruto and Sasuke failed the exam poorly, there would be a lot of bad press for Konoha. The Jinhuriki failing the Chiryunin exam, the Uchiha heir considered a prodigy staying a genin, taking the exam early in Konoha both grants us leeway but also puts pressures on their shoulders. Shinku raised an eyebrow. If I fail, nobody is going to complain, right? Oh, but you see, the first 2 tests are team-based. One fails, all fail, Kakashi smiled. Can you think what the rest of Konoha would do if their precious Naruto-tan and Sasuke-sama failed because of a certain Harino Shinku? He inclined his head to the side. Shinku shuddered. Wait, the first 2. Shinku blinked. So, the last one isn't. The last one has always been a tournament, a match where the 10 most prized genin compete in front of thousands. Winning, losing, it means nothing as long as you put up a good show for the buyers. Only a maximum of 10 genin get promoted to Chiryunin. Shinku warily asked. Well, no. There are other ways to become a Chiryunin. Administrative Chiryunin have to take a written test on Konoha's bureaucracy and stay in an internship for a couple of years. Police Chiryunin have to pass an aptitude test and result clean of criminal records. Medic nin Chiryunin need to pass a few exams and intern in the hospital for nearly half a decade. Generally, Chiryunin is simply meant to define the average ninja. And we have to take the exam right. Shinku swallowed nervously. I really enjoy written tests, you know. Good to know, Kakashi hummed. Now listen well, in 1 month, passing the final part of the exam would be impossible, but we are shinobi, not samurai. So, I'll tell you how to cheat. What? Shinku nearly choked on his saliva. Keep your voice down, Kakashi waved his hand. Really, training you every day until you get to the other's level? Impossible, I tell you. I tell you how to pass the first 2 exams, so you won't have a problem failing the 3rd one. And then? Shinku muttered. Then you'll be able to take your nice written test for administrative Chiryunin afterwards. Of course that means you'll be barred from leaving Konoha on missions, which would in turn mean they would have to put someone else in your place. I'll fill your spot with Uzuki-san, leave her to deal with the biggest problems and enjoy freeloading once more, Kakashi smiled. Isn't that a wonderful plan? What if I want to? To become stronger? Who? You. Kakashi snorted, can you lift 50 kilos with one hand for 100 times? Naruto can. She trained since she was 5, just like Sasuke. You'll never catch up. There is no mystical power that is which will make you as strong as them in little time. Plainly put, you'll always be in the shadows. I hope you don't have dreams of personal glory, kid, because you'll never realize them. Shinku's fists clenched. Why are you saying this? He hissed. Because it's the truth. I admit if you were a fanboy, I'd be outright uprooting any of that shit out of your body through repetitive beatings, but you're just a kid stuck in a team of ninja. I can give you the mentality of the ninja, I can teach you all the dirty tricks in the book of the ninja, but in the end, you are a kid. Aren't you one? I'm not a. Why didn't you train in the academy? You know, the dead last position is such a nice tradition because it helps the prodigies by showing them off in contrast to the weak link. Kakashi chuckled. You could have learned many more things if you had tried a little bit, but you didn't. You slacked off, right? You went playing with your friends, you enjoyed your fires of youth, and you didn't study. You didn't. Shut. His fists trembled. He ground his teeth. The hell up, he hissed. You don't know me. You don't know what I did or how I did it. No, but I can assume, like will everyone else. Kakashi closed his only visible eye. And assuming something, in our world, is ground for dying a horrible death. Haytake chuckled. Do you know how a 5-year-old can survive in the trenches, becoming a Chunin a 6? At 5, the enemy shinobi is stronger, smarter, faster and knows many more techniques and tricks than you will ever do. You can be a prodigy in the academy, but a Jounin will still kill you with one swift blow. You misdirect them. Exactly, Kakashi remarked. You lie. You cheat. You hit low. You grab the dirt and throw it in their eyes. You scream like a scared child and then stab them ruthlessly when they begin to gloat. You fake death. You bleed and throw the blood in their eyes. You lash out with explosive tags primed, uncaring if your fingers are torn off in the blast. He opened and closed his left hand. They had to reattach my index and middle finger thrice before I made Chunin. Shinku felt the bile and the disgust in his stomach rise. Do you know you can still fight even when gutted? You know a broken bone can be used as a spear if you need. Enough, Shinku croaked. Please, enough. No, Kakashi smiled. It is not enough. The human body is a marvelous machine made for survival. It bleeds, it breathes, it suffers, but at the same time, it is the reason humans are superior to beasts. We can think, and as long as we can think calmly and coldly through any situation, then we can do everything. Kakashi drummed with his fingers on the table. How would you go about killing me, Shinku? Let's say your objective is to kill me, because otherwise I will kill you, the Jounin smiled. How would you do that? Poison. You were quick to answer, Kakashi chuckled, already thought about killing me once You'll find out the most common poisons are out. Smart or paranoid ninja develop an immunity to them or know how to flush them out of their system. Kakashi clicked his tongue. But yes, generally poison is an acceptable strategy. It is however common, and easy to see through. Furthermore, poisons are costly and spoil easily. Another method. When you're sleeping, Shinku muttered. Close. Surprisingly, you will find many shinobi learn never to truly rest unless they're safely hidden beneath a floorboard and concealed by at least 5-inch thick steel walls with a surefire escape route already planned out, Kakashi smiled. And some simply sleep very little, randomly, and in public places in the middle of the day. I should catch you by surprise, Shinku remarked. Like while talking normally, I should Pamakunao and slice your throat. That would be a viable strategy, Kakashi nodded. My reflexes would however stop you. Shinku clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. I wouldn't fight you. That's not viable, Kakashi stated. I would hunt you down and kill you, possibly in the most painful way ever devised. I'd pay someone strong enough to kill you, Shinku mumbled. Or I'd pay you double the amount someone else paid you to kill me. My reason to kill you is personal, say, abandoning your teammates, Kakashi smiled. In the end however, it boils down to how much money and protection you can harness to prolong your life, but the true way to kill me, to kill anyone, is to plan it all beforehand. Thinking on the fly is more Naruko's forte. She never thinks, never plans, never looks ahead or behind. The previous exams reports are available to the public eye. Shinku asked, his eyes narrow. Of course, Kakashi rolled his eye. Someone has to warn the world who's a prodigal Chiryunin and who isn't one, right? Shinku shuddered, exhaling loudly. I don't know if you're genuinely helping me, hindering me, or scaring me senseless. That's good then, Kakashi hummed. I like to remain a mysterious individual to the persons I might end up killing. It increases my fame. Shinku's voice cracked. I'm not going to abandon them, all right. You say this now, Kakashi remarked. You will have to prove it. Dinner ended on talks on the proper ways to gut someone. Shinku had to admit, if they had told him he'd be discussing gutting over dinner, he'd have called them mad before calling the police for help. He didn't even feel green. Preconceptions are bad, Shinku muttered. Assumptions are wrong, he mumbled. If I abandon my teammates, Kakashi will kill me painfully. He chuckled bitterly. Nothing like the menace of an early and painful death to get us going, right Shinku? You're right, Shinku, he murmured. What a mess. He walked back home. The house remained empty, as always. The note on the table changed, however, this one reciting just a few more lines. Preparing for the Chiryunin exams? Do your best. We'll definitively come to cheer for you if you reach the finals. Shinku closed his eyes shut. That man, he growled. In the end, he didn't tell me anything about the first two tests, grumbling, he slammed his right fist on the table. So that's how we're going to play it, One thing did change. He no longer saw Fu, Naruko, or Sasuke for the entire month. He wasn't lonely. Kakashi was basically spending time with him every day from 6 in the morning to 9 in the afternoon. Still, he wondered what the deal was. It looked less and less about training, more about simply slacking off, and talking. They talked about many things. He scrunched his face, trying to recall a moment in which they had talked again about the first two tests, but Kakashi was good. He had to admit it, he never managed to get an answer out of the Jounin. He slipped away like some sort of eel and changed the discussion so subtly it was agonizing. On the positive side, Kakashi paid both for lunch and for dinner. So, tomorrow is the big day, Kakashi remarked dryly. Do you feel ready? Shinku snorted. You're not going to tell me about the first two tests ever, are you? Nope, Kakashi smiled, you're just not very good at seeing what's in front of your eyes. Kakashi sighed. We spent a month talking about proper ways to kill people. We talked about how to initiate counterattacks and aiming for weak points, but never once did you let me practice. Why? You wouldn't put your heart in it, Kakashi replied with a shrug. And overusing the genjutsu teaching would have probably scarred you for life. Like I ain't scarred to begin with, Shinku snorted. Maybe, but you had a nice wind-down month, right? You had no adrenaline-pumping chases, no fear of dying, nice and soothing month of talking, even better than dealing with a psychiatric mind reader. I didn't have to show anything, or take D-ranks. You're awfully sure I'm not going to die, Shinku quipped back. So the exams don't really pose a risk. Maybe, but then again I told you once already, you're all set. Shinku half closed his eyes, crossing his arms over his chest. So it means you already trained me for it. It means it has to be something I'm already good at, or at least passable. You wouldn't let an undertrained genin in a team with Naruko or Sasuke, you made it abundantly clear. So the reason you haven't trained me physically is because I should be able to intrinsically follow through at least until the third test. Yes, so. Kakashi hummed as he broke his chopstick apart before picking on the meat. We've been eating nothing but meat for this entire month, Shinku dryly mumbled. I can't help but feel there's a connection somewhere. Making you juicer for the tigers, Kakashi shrugged. Tigers? Shinku's eyes blearily gazed at Kakashi. You just dropped that hint out, didn't you? You said something. How Kakashi managed to eat without revealing his face. So tigers, Tora? I doubt a Chiryunin would have to deal with a cat. By the way, you can't access the reports on the past Chiryunin exams unless you're a Chiryunin, and the tasks before always change. That's basic info, Kakashi shrugged. Tigers, tigers. Shinku's eyes trailed down to the meat on his table, and then to his right hand. Tigers, the forest of death. Kakashi hummed away. One task is in the forest of death. You already threw us in there, meaning you did it on purpose, knowing fully well the Chunin exam to come. Shiku's eyes narrowed on him. And all that talk about killing, all that stuff about wanting to teach me assassination, it's because there's to kill in there, right? Kakashi slowly lowered his chopsticks on the surface of the table. Quietly, he brought both hands up and, in front of Shiku's bewildered gaze, clapped once. Good, Kakashi's lone eye narrowed. You understand why? Only 10 reach the finals, Shinku mumbled. So the numbers have to be reduced. Good, and, for the other task? It's the first one then, Shinku mumbled. The second is the forest, but the first, I don't know, we just talked for the entire month, but, he looked upwards. It's held at the academy. Our meeting spot for the Chunin exam is held at the academy, so. He blearily looked at Kakashi, it's an exam. Right. Scathingly, Shiku's murderous glare could have killed anyone. It's a frigging exam. Congratulations, Kakashi replied with a thumb up. You just realized what the tasks are. Just the day before, meaning you won't have the time to become a nervous wreck over the course of agonizingly long weeks because you are now 100% fucked up on the first exam. Which would be nice, Shiku's eyes glinted, if it weren't for the fact that the first 2 exams are team failures, so, studying is meaningless, right? Kakashi's eye mischievously glinted back, oh? Really? So, it's an exam where studying isn't needed, Shinku mumbled. It can't be physical, because you would have trained me for it, but then, it concerns the mind in some way, Shinku grumbled. Something shinobi-like to boot, so, the test isn't what it appears to be, hence one doesn't have to actually do it to pass. You know, Kakashi tapped his fingers on the table. There are many ways a mission can go. You can plan it before going, acquiring all the needed information and then executing it. You can think of something on the fly, or you can simply get to it through brute force alone. Kakashi looked at the surface of the table with interest. The ability to think isn't something you should disregard in favor of some sort of higher power or greater technique. It's thinking that got me through the war, not techniques. I couldn't do my trademarked technique of the Reikiri until I received the Sharingan. Shinku awkwardly looked down too, before closing his eyes. Why don't you show this side to Naruko, or Sasuke? You're actually a very good sensei, when you get down to it, I understand the reasoning behind your words, and... Ah, they wouldn't get it, Kakashi chuckled. I told you there was a reason I took a particular interest in you, didn't I? It's very simple, really. Maybe I'm mad and tomorrow I'll be back to torturing you with hellish techniques, but, the world isn't a happy place, but it is neither a shitty place. It's just, a place. Some people suffer, other people laugh. Many people cry and many more play and fool around. Thousands go about their daily lives and millions breathe and live through the day without worries. Kakashi hummed. The world isn't made of liars. It's not made of psychopaths or abusers. It's simply, made. You graduated at 5, Shinku mumbled. Your teammates were meant to be 7 years older. No, war graduation is bumped down to students 9 years old, Kakashi said. I graduated 4 years early than my classmates, in a single year. The academy begins at 6 now, Shinku remarked. But, that means you were in a team of older students. Shinku's head inclined to the side. A thought struck him. You were abandoned on the battlefield. Kakashi's lone eye narrowed into a thin slit. Are you guessing now? You were abandoned, and so you abandoned in turn, Shinku muttered, until you were proven wrong by your dead teammate. That's from where everything else stems, right? That's why you don't want anyone else to make your same mistake. Isn't that right? Ah, well, my father chose a shitty moment to commit suicide, Kakashi chuckled, his eye returning soft. When you're the son of the principal cause for the war you're fighting in, it's no wonder your teacher who just lost her son might aptly forget you in a trench and divert the reinforcements elsewhere. That's a pretty good intuition you have there, Shinku. Everyone has issues, he mumbled. Exploit them, he looked at Kakashi. You taught me that. I did. Yes, Shinku's eyes softly gazed at the man in front of him, and then he smiled. Thanks for everything, Kakashi-sensei. OHI, Kakashi's only eye narrowed half-bored. You're awfully talkative tonight. You prefer Kakashi Teiko? Shinku hissed out. Not bad, Kakashi acquiesced. I was in Umbu for quite a while, you know. It sure feels nostalgic. The others will probably have reached new levels by now, Shinku sighed. Then again, it never was a matter of being on their same pedestal, right? Kakashi chuckled. If it can make you feel better, know that not even Jiraiya-sama can stop Naruko when she reaches the four-tailed state, and that's a Sannin we're talking of. Shinku swallowed. But they're your beautiful teammates, so. Kakashi calmly began to let a shuriken spin on the tip of his index finger. Don't let them come to harm anyway, understood? Hi, Teiko. By the way, you know you can't bring your flak jacket to the exams, right? Shinku's startled cry of what echoed through the restaurant. Kakashi just chuckled more. It was so easy to rile the boy up. He didn't get that much fun out of Naruko or Sasuke at all. Chapter 40, Going through habitual motions is easy. It was a bright sunny day, as Shinku walked out towards the academy. His parents had already gone, leaving behind a good luck notice on the table. Well, some things would never change. Walking across the street, his hands in his jacket and his eyes stuck to the road, he shuddered. He was going to enter the Churyunin exams. The first two tests were easy. The last one was impossible. He had to remember that. He stopped at the entrance to the academy's courtyard. Barely outside was one of his teammates already waiting, his back against the wall. Shinku, Sasuke acknowledged him with a nod. He wore the usual blue shirt and white cargo pants, but strapped on his back was a sword nearly the same size as him. Sasuke, he returned the nod. He wasn't very different. Shinku's fingers had band-aids all over, and the jacket he wore held a strangely firm neck and form as if someone had spent the entire night stuffing it with the same chainmail normally inserted inside a jounin's flak jacket. Nice jacket, Sasuke's lips twitched upwards. Slept well last night? Don't tell me, Shinku's right eyebrow twitched back in reply. The bastard could have told me about it earlier, he yawned. I probably forgot a layer somewhere and with my luck, the enemy will target it. I hope not, Sasuke's eyes now gazed at him with a worried look. Kakashi didn't torture you, right? He didn't, he barely said, when a blur of orange tackled Sasuke's throat as another arm snaked up to tackle his own. He was glad for the neck protector he knew detaching and reattaching it to his jacket would pay off. Yuki-chan. Shin-chan. It's been so long. Naruko cried of joy. She wasn't any different from the last month, still wearing her usual orange jumpsuit and with her hair tied in ponytails going towards the back. Shinku coughed, before making an awkward smile at Fu, who flew down next. The girl returned the smile bashfully. Hi, she said, waving. Hey, Shinku replied. Oh, the lecherous gaze of Naruko interrupted a few seconds later, breaking the mood if one had even formed to begin with. How was your training? Fu asked, excited. We did a lot of cool stuff this month. Like flying, fighting, throwing paintballs. I was taught how to use swords of various lengths, Sasuke remarked. Uzuki-sensei is particularly proficient in the usage of a katana. I had to convince Fuzzy Butts to be less of a dick, Naruko pouted. But then my mom taught me a few seals, so it's all for the better. Shinku smiled awkwardly when everyone gazed at him. Kakashi, we sparred. Before any of them could say anything more, Kakashi chuckled as he appeared in a flicker of leaves. Kakashi nii. Naruko exclaimed, you better have been good to Shin-chan, he's our team mascot. Kakashi hummed, flipping through the pages of an Ika-Ika. It seems my team is as ready as it will ever be, he inclined his head to the side, completely ignoring Naruko's words. Not thanks to you Kakashi nii, Naruko retorted bitterly. Haven't seen you for a month. If that's your way of teaching Shin-chan we'll have to carry him all the way to the end. Well, that's what teammates are for, Kakashi smiled brightly. Keep each other safe during the exams, he frowned. Well, I know I have been a bad teacher but, I want to tell you that I'm proud of all of you, his voice grew serious, as he crossed his arms over his chest. You all did well as my genin, and I have hopes you will all do even better as my Churyunin. We're moving into Yojo's team the moment we are all promoted, Sasuke retorted dryly. There's no way in hell anyone would want to remain in your team, you psychopath. Kakashi swiped away a fake tear. Oh well, I'll be back to being a freeloader then. Shrugging, the silver-haired Jounin clapped his hands together. I have a special gift to deliver to each of you, now that you made me think about it. With that said, Kakashi proceeded to hand over to Naruto, Sasuke and Shinku. An Ika Ika Porn Fest Explosion Maximum Fiesta. Sasuke narrowed his eyes in annoyance. Really? After 1 month without your annoying presence, this is what you deliver. Shinku calmly hid his in his flak jacket. It was a very despicable gift, but if they had to be in the forest of death, toilet paper. One should never go in the forest without toilet paper. There was a moment of hesitation before Kakashi delivered a 4th book to Fu. Well, I thought it would suck to be left out, he added at the perplexed gaze from his other 3 students. Plus, she can learn a lot of new and exciting stuff while you 3 go and take the exam. Just be careful of some teams, have a look around, try to spot familiar faces. Fu carefully opened the first page. She turned a bright, blushing crimson color and then eeped, closing the book. She did clutch it to her chest, taking small breaths to calm down. Shinku wearily gazed around. There were a few groups waiting outside, from Suna, Aim, Kusa, a couple were from Kiri, but the chill he felt. It was from the sword-wielding Kirigaku or Swordsman of the Mist. The one he knew very well. Their gazes met for just an instant, and quickly Shinku averted his own. Stiffly, he swallowed the lump of nervousness that now settled in his throat. Hey Take-san, Yojo's voice reached his ears, as the female Exumbu appeared next without the usual shower of leaves. Wait, did that mean Kakashi arrived early? You're already here? I'm saying goodbye to my startling young team, Kakashi sniffled. They'll become great Chiryunin, I'm sure. Well, 2 out of 3 at least, I'm not so sure about the dark-haired one. Shinku sighed, dropping his shoulders. OHI, Yuki-chan's going to do his best. Naruto shot back angrily. He's referring to me, Shinku remarked. I know that, Naruto clicked her tongue, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of saying it aloud. Yojo softly gazed at all 3 of her students, before giving a quick nod. Now remember that whatever happens, I'll be proud of all of you. She hesitated for a moment. I'm sure you all trained hard for this moment, so I will not say good luck. You don't need luck. You prepared for this moment. Go inside, and come back Chiryunin. Not everyone passes the exams on their first try, so do not feel dejected if you fail, it is normal. There was a flash of light, and Naruto sputtered. My baby is participating in the Chiryunin exams. Kushina tackled Naruto, so that was where the girl had acquired her flying tackle hug to begin with, and then hugged her firmly. Naruto gagged for air as her red-haired mother held the grip for a few moments more. OHI. You said you wouldn't come. Naruto whined, you're embarrassing me. Kushina, let her go or she won't be able to breathe, the yondaime said next. I trust everyone feels ready for the exam. Minato Namikaze asked, his cerulean eyes settling on each of the 3 genin one by one. If any of you do not wish to participate, you know it is not an obligation. I'm sure waiting a few years would not be a problem. Sasuke stilled. Naruto bit her tongue. Shinku froze and then turned his murderous gaze on to Kakashi. The man had made it seem as if the Hokage wanted them to participate. The bastard. Shinku's shoulders shook slightly, but he remained quiet. He blinked when he realized everyone was looking at him. Were they really expecting him to say no? He could just imagine the crowds of people screaming Naruto-tan and Sasuke-sama below his window and out for his blood. Is everyone sure? Minato asked one last time, as the awkward silence stretched on. Shinku nodded, making a small smile. Yes. Naruto sighed, shaking her head. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, before shrugging. We'd better go or we'll be late. Fu said suddenly, clasping with her right hand Shinku's own. Her left still held the Ika book. Good luck. Thanks, Shinku stammered out, his face heating up. Kakashi hummed as he watched the three genin walk away, Naruto patting Shinku's back quite strongly with a lecherous gaze that was all too similar to Jiraiya's own. Kakashi. The yondaime said, his voice low. What did you teach the boy? Absolutely nothing, Kakashi replied in his carefree voice. He's probably going to die. Kakashi. Minato sighed, shaking his head while exhaling. Where did I go wrong with you? Zabuza watched the trio of Konoha genin entering the exams, and then narrowed his eyes. You see the boy with the jacket? If you don't want to spend the rest of the following month training with me. The man growled, when you get a chance, make sure he fails. The three Kirigakure genin he hadn't even cared to remember their names nodded stiffly before breaking off in a quick run towards the academy, as far as possible from him. Zabuza chuckled, watching the little genin go while scared senseless was fun. He hoped the team with the yondaime's daughter would kill them. He needed better genin than those three, but he couldn't actually kill them, not without looking bad for the future applicants. He gave a gruff nod in Shinku's direction. He chuckled when the boy's sharp eyes went from him to his genin. He should have become a jounin sensei sooner. Third floor, Sasuke grumbled. They all climbed, ignoring the mass of people stuck at the second floor for some strange reason. Well, Shinku had been about to stop at that floor. There was the third floor plaque just outside, but Sasuke had rolled his eyes and kept on climbing without a word. Naruto had snorted. He had followed his teammates. The correct classroom in which they entered had another door, but already packed a variety of shinobi. Dark eyes stared at them with a promise of murder, and Shinku shuddered, feeling incredibly cold. Why couldn't he take the written test like all other administrative Chiryunin? Sasuke Kyuyun. A whale-like scream tore the air as Ino jumped from her group to Sasuke's side. Gripping tightly her hands in a sort of prayer, she earnestly said, Are you all right? It's been so long. Have you? Shinku hesitantly took a step backwards as the rest of Team 10 walked forward. OHI, Ino pig, get the hell away from Yuki-chan, Naruto shot right back, walking in front of Sasuke. You're annoying. And you're ugly, fox bitch, Ino retorted with a snort. When will you stop standing between me and my true love? Quietly, Shinku ended up way back from the rest of his team as more and more genin, mainly from Konoha, pulled to get through and watch the scene unfold. His back safely against the nearby wall, he sighed in relief. You are not an Abarame. Shinku blinked. Next to him was a cloak-wearing genin with thin sunglasses. And no. Why do I say that? I cannot feel Kikaicha buzzing from within you. I have never seen you before in the clan compounds. I see. Shinku hesitated. So why do you have an insect with chakra capacity inside your right hand? The boy inclined his head to the side. Ah, well, he looked at his right hand. A friend gave it to me. Understandable, Shino nodded. You are friends with Fusan, are you? Oh, right, Shinku blinked. She talked with members of the Abarame clan. I know. Why do I know? I was there. I recognized the pheromones emitted by the bug, which is why I came close to ask. You are? The boy frowned for a moment. I do not recall your name. Shinku, he replied. We were in the same class. I was, behind you. Oh, Shino probably blinked behind his sunglasses. It is shameful for me to forget the name of a classmate. I apologize. I hope you are not offended. No, I'm not, Shinku shook his head lightly. I'm trying to avoid notice, he muttered, gazing at the crowd that was starting to yell louder and louder. I understand. I too was avoiding notice. Loud noises unsettle the Kikaicha. The two boys settled in a moment of serene silence. It lasted until Naruto screamed louder than the rest of the group. Shin-chan. Where the hell are you? Shinku exhaled, quietly starting to take a step forward when the doors opened up with a bang. Be quiet. A tall, broad, and outright scary man roared. If I hear someone screaming again, I'll have your throat served with green tea for dinner. The door slammed close a moment afterwards. Everyone dispersed, awkwardly moving to the sides of the room. This is your entire fault. Ino hissed. Naruto ignored her and checked on Shinku first, gazing worriedly as if she were some sort of overbearing grandmother worried for the grandchildren. "Don't you get out of my sight again," Nariko said firmly, making Shinku shudder from the strength of the tone. "Really, there's a bunch of backstabbing bastards around here, so stick with the team, understood?" Sasuke sighed. "Come off it, idiot," the Uchiha rolled his eyes. "I doubt they'd murder him in the middle of the day with all these eyewitnesses." Nariko was about to retort, when her eyes narrowed and she literally growled, pulling Shinku right behind her. "What y'all looking at, freak eyes?" Shinku thankfully collided with Sasuke, whose firm grip held him up. The moment his eyes finally found the reason for yet another fight of Nariko, he stared perplexedly at the quivering form of a Hyuga girl trembling like a leaf. "And Nariko-san. I asked you a question," Nariko growled. "What are you looking at? Are you stupid or something, Hyuga?" There was silence. Deep, unsettling silence stretched through the entire room as if a wave of cold water had crashed down on everyone's shoulders. This wasn't Nariko being incensed at Ino for annoying Sasuke. This wasn't even being angry about not telling her of the bridge mission. This was Nariko being truly, without a doubt, filled with hatred for someone else. The Hyuga girl trembled on the verge of collapsing, her breathing sharp and ragged as she squeaked out in fear and fright. "OHI! Stop that!" Another boy walked forward, holding a white puppy on his head and standing straight in front of the Hyuga girl as if to protect her. "Inuzuka," Sasuke remarked dryly, walking to stand next to Nariko. "They nominated your pathetic dog breath ass in the exams. Hey bitchy, still sore about that kick in the balls?" the Inuzuka remarked. "Mutt face, you wanna start something?" Nariko slurred out in a Yakuza-like slang. "I'm sure we can have you clean some dog shit from the park or something." "No, wait, you dogs eat the shit to begin with, right?" Shinku really wanted to know what was going on, but he refrained and stood in his corner. Shino apparently was doing the very same thing. How nice, they were doing the same thing, hoping their teammates wouldn't notice their absence. It didn't take much however for Nariko to zero in with her eyes on him. Was she really keeping an eye out wherever he went each second? What was he, a child in a supermarket that had to be on a tight leash? A few minutes later, and a bulk of people entered the already packed class. This time a few familiar faces made their way inside Matogai's team for one, and following behind them was Hibachi. Only, his team had an older Konoha genin rather than a Kunoichi. Ami appeared to be missing. She dropped out. Ino's voice came in a low whisper. "You know, what you did, it scared her so much she dropped out." The hair at the back of his neck rose. "You're a bit of psycho, right? Acting all meek and gentle, but you're wearing a mask, the same thing Nariko-chan hates a lot to see in others. You're probably a liar. I wonder if I told her, what would she do?" He turned around, ready to answer back, but it was too late as the doors once more barged open from the side with the examiners. "Come on in. Sit down at the numbered spot. They should all coincide with your shinobi ID." The man in question was wearing a large bandana, covering the upper side of his head. He wore a dark jacket dyed black, and his face held many scars. His entire appearance made him terrifying to behold. Right. The first test was a written exam. So why did it look more like an execution? He could do this. You have all been assigned a number. Look for it and sit down there. It didn't require studying, so. Now listen up. You have 10 questions, 1 paper, and each cheating attempt will take 2 points out of 10. I'll tell you lot the 10th question when only 15 minutes remains, so get to it. Any question you don't answer will remove a point. As luck would have it, Shinku was in the first row. He stared blearily at the face of the bandana-wearing instructor who was standing a mere airbreadth away from his desk, and then lowered his gaze to the paper. The psychological metaphysical evidence of a yin exchange release ties into which sects of cult that plagued the elemental countries during the Warring States period, enunciate in at least 25 lines, taking care of writing the names of each of them. Shinku blinked. Wait. They didn't have any written records of the Warring States period. That was an easy question. It was a trick question. It meant that the solution to the problem was to find an answer that worked, rather than actually trying to answer such a thing. Shinku flexed his fingers, before realizing a very important fact. He was without a pencil. His head went thunk against the desk. He couldn't do that. He couldn't ask that. He couldn't, absolutely, without any doubt, do that. He had to answer however. He needed a pen. He needed a crayon, or some blood in a brush, something to write at least. His kunao were in his pouch however, and if he took them out, at the same time, if he didn't cut his finger he had no hope of writing anything. He had to wonder where his pen had gone to. Weren't they supposed to hand one over? The Kirigaku or shinobi next to him smiled. It had been as easy as stealing candies from a baby. If he couldn't complete the assignment, then he wouldn't be able to participate any further. Zabuza-sensei would be pleased, and he'd probably become the next swordsman of the mist if he played his cards right. Suzuki's eyes went through the entire set of questions with relative ease. When one had the Sharingan's ability to memorize everything, even movements, it was easy to copy from the few people who knew the answer. Nariko happily smirked from her spot, having already the solution to her problems. She had infiltrated the library and right in that instant, there were at least 50 different Nariko clones looking around for answers. She had just made one appear without smoke beneath her desk, before dispersing it. Now that her plants knew the questions, she'd have the answers soon enough. A kunao struck near the desk of Suzuki, as a team from Kusa left the hall. "You're out." Soon another followed, and then a third. Shinku trembled, looking at the glaring white paper. Well, he had bandages covering his fingers. He had cut himself enough the night before, so, wait. His index finger traced the line of the Ika Ika book. Paper cuts were among the most painful things ever experienced in his life, barring his training in the forest of death, barring having his bones broken, barring, well, no. Paper cuts were actually abysmal when compared to what he had gone through. He ground his teeth and sliced away. Only for nothing to happen. Frowning, he carefully pushed the finger through the folds of the book. The papers weren't firm and stiff like those of a hard-printed copy, but more soft, moving. They were actually pretty much. He carefully pinched one and pulled it out. Slowly, ever so, he unfolded it beneath his jacket. He could swear everyone in the room was looking at him, but it wasn't cheating what he was doing, so they couldn't take points. A second, a glance, and then Shinku exhaled. It was an explosive tag. He calmly placed the tag back into the folds of the book and blinked. It was an explosive tag. Kakashi had given them explosive tags, hidden inside porn books. He didn't know whether the man was a genius for hiding explosive in porn or a madman for hiding explosive in porn. There was only one thing he could do. His finger fiddled with the back of his pouch, and then he clicked his tongue against his teeth the moment he sliced away his index's fingertip. He brought out the bleeding finger then, answering the first question with a simple kanji that stood for none. Using the band-aids from the nearby finger, he closed the wound off and sighed in relief. There, it was. Ibiki Marino's hand slammed down on his desk with enough strength that Shinku yelped. His eyes were wide as he stared at the man. "Next time, ask for a spare," the man grumbled, dropping a pen on the surface of his desk. "Thanks." He quickly gripped onto it with enough strength that it nearly shattered. He began to answer the following questions blindly, his pen stilling only when he was done at the very end. Sighing in relief, he turned his sheet over and then closed his eyes, massaging his temples. More thunk sounds followed as the teams dropped like flies for cheating. He actually wondered if the purpose of the exam wasn't to cheat, but then again, all answers were impossible to begin with. Things like, if a bird flies from the east at Mach 2 speed, then determine its kinetic mass upon impact with the head of an enemy shinobi going at Mach 1 speed, were false and tricky questions. There was no way anyone would fall for those, once you knew that birds simply couldn't reach Mach 2 of speed. Very well. Ibiki yelled suddenly, now is the time for the last question. If you choose to take it, and answer wrongly however. Ibiki stated, I'll kill you. Shinku blinked. Wait. What? What? A few voices rose from the end rows. If you choose to answer this question, and get it wrong, you will die. Ibiki smiled, calmly gripping a kunao from his belt and twirling it lazily around. It's that simple. You answer wrongly, and you die. Painfully, the other examiners began to unsheath their weapons, and without any help. There are explosive tags primed beneath your seats. You won't get away alive, if you answer wrongly. Shinku's heart drummed in his chest. That was preposterous. There was no way, it didn't even matter. He wasn't actually afraid. This was meaningless. He could see Genin stiffen up, he could see a few take the easy way out and raise their hands to admit defeat. Yet he wasn't scared at all. It felt strange. He was used to this. He was used to this sort of situation and it didn't even compare. This was nothing, outright nothing. Except for the ludicrous obvious fact that he wouldn't simply kill people. Konoha wasn't as bloody as Kiri to begin with. There was no other meaning to this than to weed out the few remaining ones. What was the purpose of doing the first 9 questions then? What was the point system all about, if it wasn't to cheat? A female voice coming from a kunoichi with Asuna headgear asked hotly. They were meant to check your ability in acquiring information, Ibiki replied gruffly. But this is the real deal. You must wager your life on whether this last question is something that you can acquire or not. You will not receive retries if you choose wrongly in the battlefield. Information is key, it is vital. The right information can save the lives of many, and the wrong one can condemn many more. The man pierced the desk in front of him. Why did it always have to be Shinku's? And bellowed once more. So. Choose. Are you all going to remain here? OHI, bandana freak. Naruko yelled back. You done? I want to become a Chiryunin before tomorrow, you know. Ibiki growled, before giving a curt nod. Very well, he said. All those that remain in here, pass. Shinku sighed at those words. A moment later, and his entire body dropped beneath the desk as the windows crashed and broke apart. He heard more thunks sounds, soon followed by a mad-female cackling. Ibiki. Anko yelled. What the hell is this? There's too many of these fuckers. The woman snorted, well, I'll cut their numbers in half anyway. Shinku waited anxiously as the woman appeared to be moving. He couldn't see her, hidden as he was beneath the desk, but he could clearly hear her. Where's my little squirming toy? OHI, he heard a thunk as someone landed atop his desk. Ya picking up trouble? If it isn't the Yondame's brat, Anko snickered. Well, I'm sure it will bring back memories. What the hell are you talking about, Naruko remarked. All of you. The second test will be in the Forest of Death. The nicest place in all of Konoha, for good old little genin who need to man the hell up. Cackling, Mitarashi Anko gently gripped Naruko's chin. I can't wait to see your squirming teammate cry, brat. Shinchan's not going to cry, you old hag. We all trained hard. Carefully, Shinku emerged from behind his desk. Yeah. Anko snickered. Well. We'll see, Forest of Death. Don't be late, you fuckers. With that exclamation, the woman jumped out of the broken window. I'm alive. Shinku whispered. Really, Shinchan? Naruko pouted, turning to gaze at him. You can't be scared of your own shadow like that. Ah, all right. Suzuki snorted, having in the meantime arrived near. Really, what was the purpose of cheating? An idiot could have simply answered wrongly and gone on with guts alone. Shinku chuckled nervously, he was glad he had turned over his sheet. Answering impossible or none to all the questions, well, that wasn't lucky at all. They walked their way outside in a group, taking to the rooftops to follow behind the purple-haired Takubitsu Jounin. Shinku exhaled as he jumped from roof to roof. A small, meager part of him laughed. It felt so nice to have the wind in his hair and be without worries for once. The Forest of Death wouldn't be that difficult, if anything, they were already trained for it. What, really, could go wrong? Have we dropped the melted chocolate? Gah! He stumbled on his next step, but quickly regained his balance. One more jump, and he hastily checked through his pockets. Yes, everything was fine. He had left it out on his desk the night before. The Takubutsu Jounin delivered the objective with ease and holding on to her cackling madness. Sasuke grumbled as he grabbed the team's scroll, before they made their way to the assigned gate. The smell of resin, of tree sap, rested heavily in Shinku's nostrils. The noises of the jungle were lullabies to his ears. The shade that encompassed all but the highest of branches was to him, well, he felt at home. Differently from the first time, they took to the trees with a speed and a grace he didn't think he'd ever possess. He wasn't weak any longer. He could follow behind now. Maybe he was just being pessimistic. He could reach them, one day. It was as his mind lost itself in such thoughts that a half-human and half-snake man with pale skin and raven hair soared through the air, before slamming an open hand straight in Naruko's guts. They were barely into the forest, but already Shinku watched as Naruko tackled in midair went sailing past him and crashed against the trunk of a tree. Naruko! Sasuke yelled, before the snake tail flipped and slammed into the Uchiha's midsection. The Susanoo rose in a split second, absorbing the blow as it sent Sasuke to crash through a couple of trees. Shinku jumped backwards, his heart beating faster than it had ever beaten before. Zabuza was a kitten. The Forest of Death was a happy holiday. The swordsmen of the mist were cute and nice people. Corpses were wonderful things to hug. Anything was better than remaining in front of Orochimaru of the Sunin, especially when he was out for blood. Shinku didn't stop running. His voice grew coarse from screaming in fear as he jumped from tree branch to tree branch, as far away from the battlefield as possible. His head pulsed, his breathing grew labored. He dropped against the trunk of another tree and gagged, before retching and shuddering among whimpers. There was no way. There was no way. There was no way in hell. Ah. Shinku breathed slowly. He couldn't go back and die. Really, he was. Kakashi will kill us, Shinku muttered. A grimace settled on his face. If we don't go back, Kakashi will kill us. Trembling, Shinku looked up to the tree branches. Kakashi will kill us. Orochimaru will kill us. If we die by Orochimaru's hands, you think they'll give us a statue? I think we'll be too dead to care. Silence settled in his mind. If he didn't go, he would die. If he went, he would die. Let's just go, he muttered. His stomach hurt as he landed on a branch overlooking the crashed tree where Naruko flew. He was already low on chakra. It was wonderful. It was a very wonderful feeling that he felt when he landed close to the crater point, his eyes adjusting to the shade beneath the thick branches. His skin crawled. He scratched his arms as he cut his way through some leafier branches and all the way inside. A small glint of golden caught his attention. Naruko was there, still and unmoving. It was such a wrong thought that he immediately removed it from his mind. The girl was the Jinhuriki of the Kyuubi, really, it had to count for something. She had probably trained extra hard with the Yondaime, acquiring all sorts of techniques. She couldn't be dead. He wondered if Kakashi would still kill him, if he told him Orochimaru had killed Naruko with only one attack. Shinku knelt down next to the girl, bringing a hand to her neck. He could feel his own heart beating, but how did it work anyway? Another technique from first aid was to bring a kunai to the mouth of the victim. If it turned slightly foggy, it meant the victim was still breathing. He did that, clasping onto the handle of one of his kunai firmly and watching anxiously. A light sheen of fog appeared over the metal. It was all right. She was still alive. Then why wasn't she waking up? Had the blow been that hard? He gripped her from the sides, letting her left arm circle around his neck as he pulled her up. He began to walk towards the exit of the thick branches, but stilled halfway through. You think someone's fighting up ahead? It was a rough voice, coming from a man covered in scars and with thick bandages in place of his forehead protector. I can hear the noises. Shijiro-san, should we wait and pick off the weak ones? Shinku did not breathe. He did not swallow. He was holding on to Naruko, barely hidden by the branches as in front of him stood three shinobi who had the task of getting their scroll. Scroll which, he didn't have, nor did Naruko. Sasuke was the one with the scroll. One of the genin turned then towards his direction, and Shinku froze. Look at that damage. You really want to go up against a genin who can do that? The older boy known as Shijiro remarked. Let's find a place to rest for the night. Check those branches. Luck is really on our side this time around. You know, if I had known being without the chocolate would land us in these hot waters. Wait, you mean our luck is shitty outright? How the hell did we survive this long? Calm down. Breathe. Think. There's 3 of them and 1 of us. What is there to think? Shinku took a step backwards as the smallest of the 3 Omegakuer genin stepped inside. Holding his breath, Shinku tightened the grip on his kunao. His reflection in the metal narrowed its eyes. You know what you have to do, it whispered to his ear. Do it. Shinku ground his teeth to paste as he charged, letting Nariko's body drop as he overextended his left arm. The genin turned, his eyes widening for a split second at the sight of a dark figure in midair coming down on him with glinting steel. It was a moment, and then the kunao struck flesh and the Omegakuer genin gurgled while his entire body flew, the strength of the impact carrying him through the branches as whatever creature had gripped on him kept on pushing him further away. His back slammed against the firm and tough trunk as his breathing came less. His spine cracked, blood filled his lungs. His eyes met with those of his murderer, and the unspoken question of why remained unanswered as Shinku ran away from the dying genin. Midare! Shijir yelled, "Ohi Midare!" He unclasped his umbrella filled with poisonous needles. You still alive in there? Yeah. The voice came a moment later. Just, giant leech scared the hell out of me in a branch. I need a hand, Shijir-san. This thing's really big. Really, Shijir grumbled. This is why being in a team of newcomers, Baiu, go and give him a hand, Shijir said, giving a nod towards the other genin who went off without a worry. How big could a leech be in any case? Shijir turned around, his ears stretching to pick up the sounds of Baiu's walk. It soon turned into a run, probably he had found. There was a light fizzling. Shijir opened his eyes to a kunao with an explosive tag stopping right at the bottom of his feet, before going off. The explosion's strength took away his ankles, making him scream in pain as he fell down clutching at the grass. Baiu! Baiu! The screams were met with the hurried return of the genin in question. Shijir-san, Then, the creature jumped from the nearby trunk down on his last victim. The wire twisted and glinted red in blood as Shinku firmly held onto both sides of his kunao's handles, the ninja wire stretched between them in a lethal hold of steel. Baiu coughed and gagged, the steel wire digging deep into his neck until it finally nicked his veins, spraying blood all around. Shijir began to push himself backwards as Baiu's corpse fell on the ground beheaded neatly. Hello there, the creature said smiling, his face inclined to the side and his body covered in blood. Going somewhere? Shijir screamed as he unloaded the poisonous needles from his umbrella. Baiu's corpse became the impromptu shield of the beast, as it filled with the needles. Horrified gurgles left Shijir's throat, as the thing simply waited and then jumped, smashing the needles together with Baiu's corpse straight against his face. The needles pierced his eyes and his forehead, the poison spread and after agonizing seconds, he saw no more. Shinku breathed in deeply, before looking around quickly. He had done it. How? He murmured. The correct ways of killing someone, he remarked. We've just made our first practice. Shinku gripped at the side of his head. Well, we both listened, but out of the two, I'm the one with the guts to apply theory into practice. Ah. Shinku coughed, the scroll. Right. Yes, the scroll. His inner self remarked. I think Shijir-san, he mock said, is the one who has it. Nobody expects to die, Shinku murmured. Nobody believes he can die in the end. Everyone thinks they'll win this, they'll survive. Nobody thinks they're going to die. He sniffled. He has a heaven scroll. We have a heaven scroll, Shinku mumbled. You know what? We could always plead to get that chocolate back. He jumped with his kunao slamming into the trunk of the nearby tree, climbing it back to the branch where he had left Nariko. I really could use some chocolate, he added. We don't have any to begin with, he gripped onto Nariko's right side, holding her up. You know, it's kind of funny, Shinku muttered. They were all about keeping an eye out for me, when they should have kept an eye out for themselves. It isn't funny, Shinku hissed. It's not funny. He stared at the direction where Orochimaru flung Sasuke. We're really going over there, he mumbled. Are we? Yes, we are, he muttered back. We killed those three. How difficult can a Chunin be in comparison? You know, he remarked. If this keeps up, we might really make it as a Chunin. Unless we die first, his whispered words carried on in the wind. He took the jump afterwards. Well, Kakashi wouldn't be able to kill him, if Orochimaru got him first. Check the description for the links to the author.